What if you woke up one day as a nobody in a brutal medieval fantasy world? No powers, no plot armor, just a sword and the constant smell of blood and shit. Our guy didn't get some overpowered system. He didn't become the chosen hero. He just became a mercenary, and somehow survived long enough to become the most dangerous, normal man in the entire kingdom. He slashed through armies, outsmarted demons, and hidden a literal demon eye growing on his body while everyone around him keeps dying in the most horrifying ways possible. But the real madness? It all started with one stupid, horny mistake: stealing a noble girl's underwear. Yeah, you heard that right. Everything started like a total cliché straight out of a cheap web novel. One ordinary guy opened his eyes and found himself trapped in a generic medieval fantasy world. No memories of how he got there, no grand quest, just pure survival. He became a mercenary, throwing himself into one brutal meat grinder after another just to see another sunrise. His blade carved bloody paths through anyone foolish enough to stand in his way. During one savage clash, a massive warrior painted for war charged him with a shield raised high. The hardened veteran didn't flinch. Steel screamed against steel as blood sprayed across the dirt and the battle hit its fever pitch. A fierce redhead on horseback roared at the troops to stay focused, warning them they'd be dead in a heartbeat if they let their guard down even for a second on this hellish field. She ordered the trumpet blown, and its heavy blast cut through the chaos like a final call. All forces charged forward in a screaming wave. In this world, our protagonist only wanted one thing: to survive. When the dust finally settled over a field of corpses and the sun sank behind the carnage, a weary captain sat among the bodies, staring into nothing. A woman approached, smiling softly as she noted he'd made it through yet again. She reached out, tilting his head gently to check that handsome face for injuries. Aaron stared back with tired eyes, and for a brief moment the world felt still. She told him everything was fine, then glanced up at the sky and mentioned how much she loved the rain. When the war ended, she suggested they head east together. Somewhere it rained all the time. She leaned in with that haunting smile and whispered, "Don't forget me." Years later, the same rain hammered down on a dark city. The weary captain stood alone, catching droplets in his palm. "It's pouring hard today," he muttered, then blew a sharp whistle. He pointed into the distance and shouted for his squad to move. The targets were trying to run. He barked at his men, calling them stupid bastards and demanding if they planned to just stand there. The soldiers scrambled through the mud as the unit leader reminded them they had to catch the fugitives before they slipped out of the castle. Two subordinates ran up. "Captain." Aaron acknowledged them and asked where the rest of the squad was. One explained they'd arrive soon, then wondered aloud how gentle Hans could have caused such a big accident. The other guard had no sympathy. "I always thought that bastard was a pain in the ass. He's a mage. Everyone knows you can't trust mages." He leaned in and whispered, "Hans must have made a pact with a demon for sure." Aaron frowned, repeating, "demon," skeptically. The first guard laughed it off, teasing his partner for being jealous because Hans stole the handsome nickname from him. The insulted guard exploded, shouting about who was stealing whose nickname. The Joker just kept laughing while Aaron turned to leave. They asked where he was going. "Headquarters," he said simply. As they walked, the Joker noted Hans's nickname would definitely be changing. When asked how, he delivered the punchline, "Handsome Hans, even if only his head is left." Aaron stayed silent, his face a mask of cold professionalism. He knew the kid would probably hang if they caught him. The rain slammed against the Kaseritic Outer Fortress Guard headquarters as Aaron knocked on the heavy wooden door. He pushed it open with a slow creak. Inside, Commander Manuel, a pompous Nepo baby in polished armor, greeted him. "A bit late, isn't it?" Aaron apologized, claiming he'd fallen into a deep sleep. Manuel hummed, then cut straight to the point. He'd heard Aaron was quite close to the criminal Hans. He leaned forward, mustache twitching. "Is it true?" Aaron admitted it was true to some extent. He remembered Hans as an unusually smart kid excited about the academy. They'd stayed in touch even after Hans entered the Magic Academy, but he quickly cut that thought off. Looking Manuel dead in the eye, he lied smoothly, "We barely exchanged greetings when we passed by." Saying more would only complicate things. Manuel looked relieved. Fortunate. He grew serious. This wasn't some simple crime. It involved the Lord's daughter. Hans had stolen something that should never have been touched. Manuel slapped Aaron's shoulder, laughing about how capturing the criminal would definitely please the Lord. Then his face darkened. "Bring him in. Dead or alive." Aaron gave a cold promise to do his best. As he walked away, he thought how annoying this whole mess was. Because of that damn Hans, his own head was now on the line. He met up with Kaseritic Outer Fortress Guard Unit 4. Everything was set. They marched into filthy District 7 while the guards complained that even if mages were crazy, there was no way Hans would hide in this dump. They griped about the brat's weak stomach and how they didn't want to wander around a place with no proper toilets while getting soaked. One suggested they just pretend to search and grab a beer instead. Aaron's eye glowed with terrifying purple light. "Shut your mouths." The guards instantly folded. "Yes, sir." He thought about how these foolish medieval idiots were talking about drinking when their lives were at stake. Scanning the dirty alleyways, he spotted a suspicious figure in a brown hoodie. "Take off the hood." The figure turned with a creepy chuckle. "It's been a while." As the hood came down, Aaron didn't hesitate. He delivered a massive punch that sent the guy flying. The man groaned on the ground. Aaron called him a bastard for causing problems and getting caught. But the guy looked up, confused. "Who the hell are you?" "I'm just a local herbalist who was about to report a theft." Aaron realized his mistake with a dumbfounded expression. The guy just looked familiar. The herbalist cried about his crappy day. Herbs stolen and then beaten by guards for no reason. He muttered about why a thief would desperately steal common grimroot, which grew everywhere on the hills. Aaron's ears perked up. Grimroot stopped bleeding. Where did the herb thief go? Meanwhile, in a dark alley, the real Hans slumped against a wall, shivering and wounded. Aaron found him. "Hans." The kid looked up in terror as the captain loomed over him. Aaron asked what was with that look. Hans used to be a clean freak, yet here he was pathetically cutting off his own hand. "It's over. Come quietly while I'm still being nice." Hans stuttered that it wasn't over yet, eyes wide with desperation. Aaron sensed something wrong as water began to swirl. The kid was using magic, and in the rain, that power was filthy and massive. Hans apologized to his brother. "I can't get caught yet." He unleashed a massive wave of water magic, trying to wash Aaron away. The captain gritted his teeth, annoyed by the coincidence of water magic on a rainy day. He took a deep breath. He'd just have to overpower the mage. Charging through the torrent, his eyes glowed red with killing intent. Hans screamed for him to hurry up, desperately trying to finish a spell. Aaron told him to shut his mouth, venom dripping from the word, mage. He knew power lay in a mage's words and gave him no chance to finish. His blade slashed through the magic and stopped just inches from Hans's neck. Hans cried out, calling him, brother, one last time. Blood dripped from a small cut on the kid's neck as he begged to be spared. Aaron stared at him, mentioning the rumors about a demon contract. If that's true, there should be a scar near the heart. He ripped open Hans's shirt. The kid's chest was clean. Aaron sighed. "Why would you do something like this if you're not a demon's minion?" Hans gave a sad smile. "It'd be hard to understand even if I explained, but you'll find out someday." Aaron heard the other guards approaching. He wiped his face in frustration, muttering that he was going crazy. He pulled out a recovery potion from his cloak and poured it over Hans's wound. "Stop being ridiculous and follow me." Then he hesitated. Looking at the wounded boy, he wondered if losing an arm for stealing was enough punishment. In this damned medieval world, it was either innocent or hanging. He kicked open a secret exit in the wall. "Get lost." Hans looked up in shock. "Brother." Aaron lost it. "Stop calling me brother and just get lost." Hans thanked him with tears in his eyes and vanished into the shadows. The other guards arrived, shouting that this was the only area left and ordering a search of every corner. Aaron stood alone in the rain, muttering for the kid not to call him brother. Hans had completely disappeared from the fortress. Back at the manor, the true horror of the crime was revealed. A maid panicked over the laundry. The handsome, friendly Hans was actually a pervert bastard. The thing he stole from the Lord's daughter wasn't a magical artifact or secret document. It was her underwear. Aaron stood in the rain, looking up at the sky with a soul-crushing realization. He wondered whose underwear it even was as he lamented being a guard captain in this damned, chaotic world. Just when you thought the day couldn't get any worse, our boy was back at base, absolutely fuming. Aaron slammed his fist on the table, cursing that rat-like bastard Hans for disappearing into thin air. He demanded to know where the kid could have possibly gone. Kale, the unit's previous handsome man, sighed that he couldn't believe they failed to find him after searching the entire Kaseritic fortress. He admitted the punk Hans was actually quite good. Brig, the youngest, wondered if Hans used magic to escape since he was a mage. Poole, the one they called Snake Eyes, clicked his tongue and called Brig an idiot. Why do we even have arms if everything's possible with magic? Brig could only stutter as the resident sleepyhead, Carter, mumbled in his sleep, begging everyone to be quiet. He whined that he hadn't slept 5 hours in 3 days and felt like he was dying. The unit leader noted you don't die just from lack of sleep, but Poole looked dark, claiming this punk would definitely die since he'd thrown up from exhaustion yesterday. Vermin, who held unofficial second place in the unit, suddenly stood up and declared the search over. "Rest well," he said proudly, making the others wonder why a fraud was flexing so hard. As the meeting broke up, a new player entered. Aaron, captain of Unit 4, was interrupted by a man lighting a smoke. The stranger greeted him. Constable William. The human cleaner knew exactly who this was. A high-tier threat who could cut a neck with one word or toss someone into an underground prison for life. William looked like the vertex of the guards, a total powerhouse. He mentioned he'd heard the captain was close to the criminal Hans. Furthermore, Aaron had continued patrolling District 7 alone and conveniently found nothing in an area internal guards couldn't look. He basically accused him of letting the kid go. The hardened veteran didn't flinch. There was nothing in that district aside from poop. William stared him down, tension thick enough to cut, before Fat Commander Manuel scurried over. William noted the expensive cigarettes Manuel gave him tasted excellent, coming from high-end Kennett Street. He found it impressive Manuel could afford such items on a small salary. The commander started sweating, lying that they were a gift from a distant relative. William didn't buy it, warning everyone in the castle that anyone who committed a crime or helped a criminal would die by his hands. He even used Aaron's chest plate to put out his cigar. Keep that in mind. Our hero stood there as William walked away, then flashed a massive fake smile. I'll definitely keep it in mind. As the sun set over the fortress, the guards bid the captain good night. Aaron walked through the streets, thinking about how these damned Middle Ages had no sense of human rights. He rubbed his neck, wondering how long that investigation would last and hoping Hans had really escaped. Suddenly, a high-pitched scream cut through the air. The weary captain followed it to the Laughing Rabbit Inn, where he found total disaster. Henna, the pretty inn owner, was being harassed by a group of trashy mercenaries. A massive brute named Dylan gripped her hand, laughing that she was too pretty for them to leave. Henna begged him to let go, but his red-haired friend told Dylan to treat the lady like a gentleman. The redhead looked at her with a creepy grin, claiming she was misunderstanding. They were just trying to make local friends since they hadn't been to this village in a while. He leaned in, suggesting a friendship where they could share a bed all night. The mercenaries burst into laughter. Henna pulled away, warning them they looked like foreigners and things would get bothersome if they kept this up. She told them to stop before they regretted it, but the redhead slammed his hand on the table. He stood, towering over her. What are you going to do if we don't want to stop? He mocked her, asking if she thought some guard would actually come. There's no way those guys would show up for an isolated, shabby inn. Just then, the door swung open. Aaron stepped inside. Henna's face lit up. Aaron. The mercenaries turned to see the monster of the inn standing there, looking completely unbothered. He walked past the thugs, boots thudding. He didn't even glance at them. 10 days. Henna frowned. 5 days. It's less than last time. You're a guard. This is your job. The captain noted he'd already clocked off. 9 days. They haggled like it was a flea market. Henna shouted 6 days and claimed she couldn't go higher. The mercenaries stood there looking like total losers, wondering why they were being ignored. The red-haired punk snapped, screaming that he dared ignore them and calling him a devilish bastard. The bald mercenary lunged with a punch, but our protagonist didn't even turn around. He reached back and caught the guy's face in his palm with a loud thud. He sighed about the guy's foul medieval talking habit. Turning to Henna, he sealed the deal. Free lodging for 6 days and a free dinner tonight. She gave a massive thumbs up. Deal. Even though she admitted she didn't know what a deal actually was. Aaron's eye glowed purple as he tightened his grip. The mercenary screamed in pain. It was time to educate these horrible people. With a single massive strike, he sent the mercenaries flying across the room. He thought to himself, there are no bad medieval people. Only those who need to be beaten more. He landed another brutal hit, promising that once each of them took one, they'd become nicer. He slammed one into the floor with insane power. The regular patrons cheered, screaming Aaron's name and begging Henna for one more cup of ale. They admitted the only reason they became regulars was because a monster lived here. The greatest human cleaner in Kaseritic, the rogue captain of the guards. They cheered for him to kill the thugs and hit them one more time. Aaron looked at the rowdy crowd, thinking they were at it again and that he should probably give them a lesson one day too. One mercenary tried to grab an axe, but Aaron loomed over him, his shadow turning the guy's face pale. You really going to take that out? The guy immediately started sweating, hands up with a nervous, hee-hee. Clock off success. Later that night, the captain was finally in bed, but his mind wasn't at peace. He drifted into a dream of a red-haired woman covered in blood. She was crying, telling him to run away and not look back. She begged him to live on. Aaron woke in a cold sweat, gasping as he clutched his sword. He stood on his bed, looking haunted. By dawn, he was already outside in the courtyard, shirtless and pushing his body through a grueling sword routine. It had already been 6 years since he fell into this world. He wondered until when he'd be able to maintain this daily routine. Suddenly, a voice from the shadows commented that his was a sword with no frills. Aaron turned to see a mysterious knight standing there in polished armor. The knight noted he didn't know there was a skilled man in the borders of Kaseritic and expressed his surprise. Aaron stood dripping with sweat, eyes narrowing as he saw the armor with the Fenner family symbol and a spiral rapier. He realized this bastard was a high-tier knight. The knight stood there like a total endgame boss, a symbol of the group that handled auras and fought demons, supposedly surpassing all human limits as the true sword of humanity. Aaron stared at him, realizing that if he was from the Fenner family, he had to be a knight from the faraway Bolt Fortress. The weary captain wondered why someone like that would come all the way to Kaseritic and if the Empire itself had sent him. The knight noticed the tension and raised a friendly hand. Nothing to be wary of. I just got excited seeing such insane sword skills without realizing it. He asked if the unit leader was a knight of some specific order, but was cut off by a sudden high-pitched scream. Ben. A blonde girl in a massive frilly purple dress came charging through the garden, demanding to know how her escort could just leave her behind. This was Vivian Fullputs, the only daughter of the Kaseritic lord and basically the biggest Nepo baby in the region. She stopped when she saw them, realizing she'd interrupted. She offered a quick apology. Aaron immediately took a knee, greeting the young lady with professional grace. She laughed with a bubbly, "Oh my," saying it was nice to meet Captain Aaron. Then she dropped a total bombshell. She'd heard he had a lot of trouble because of her undergarments last time and offered a sincere apology for her father making such a huge fuss over nothing. Our protagonist kept his cool, simply stating it was fine while secretly wondering why a Bolt Fortress knight was escorting her. Vivian decided they should be on their way, noting Sir Ben might have interrupted the captain's training. Ben looked back at the hardened veteran one last time with a suspicious glint, thinking it strange that a mere guard carried himself like a high-tier knight. Aaron stood alone in the clearing, sensing something fishy but deciding it wasn't his business. He should just head to work. Suddenly, the air shattered with a monstrous roar of his name that sounded like it came from the depths of hell. Aaron looked like he wanted to die. What happened now? In this medieval world, there were absolutely no turn signals for the chaos that hit you. He arrived at the Kaseritic inner fortress and opened a door only to be greeted by a screaming Commander Manuel. The fat commander was red in the face, asking if the rogue captain had lost his mind and why he hadn't been selective about who he hit. He bellowed about why Aaron turned the mercenaries hired by the inner fortress into literal corpses and ordered him to go solve the mess himself. Aaron walked away with a heavy sigh, unable to believe those thugs he beat up were actually mercenaries from the Winter Fortress. He approached another door, knocking softly as he prepared to meet the official in charge. A sharp voice told him to come in. He entered the office of Nova, the Kaseritic Castle's administrative officer. She didn't even look up from her paperwork. "It's you again." Nova was clearly at the end of her rope, shadows of stress covering her face. She told him that if the job didn't suit him, he should just quit quickly instead of making life difficult for everyone. The weary captain thought she was the best officer but definitely had a babbling spirit. However, the unit leader had a secret plan provided by Kale, the unit's resident ladies' man. Kale's advice was to keep a soft smile and give sweet, specific compliments to win a woman over. Aaron tried his best, flashing a terrifyingly creepy smile. "Today, your plump hair looks just like a perfectly ripened orange." He leaned in with a dark aura. "It makes me want to taste it right now." Kale's spirit in the background realized something went horribly wrong as Nova stared at him in pure disgust, wondering if this guy had completely gone insane. She rubbed her temples, groaning that dealing with him just gave her a headache. "Forget it. Success." She explained that the mercenaries he knocked out were meant to be sent to Bolt Fortress. Aaron joked that those guys were more like piles of dung than mercenaries. Nova snapped, screaming at him to shut his mouth. Our hero folded immediately with a quick, yes, and she informed him that since he broke the help, he would have to fill in for them with no refusal. She promised compensation but made it clear he was cleaning up his own mess. Aaron rubbed his chin, agreeing to the carriage escort mission while wondering what was really going on. As the sun set, a massive caravan moved through the mountains. The hardened veteran looked around, noting there were a lot of people for a simple escort and most of them were other mercenaries. It looked like they were gearing up for a major battle, and he didn't have a good feeling about this one at all. He spotted a familiar face in the crowd and called out to a red-haired mercenary, asking who was riding in the carriage. The guy turned around, his face still bruised from the infight, and nearly jumped out of his skin when he saw the monster who beat him. Aaron called him a weasel, and the guy stammered that the captain was the real monster. Aaron noted that he heard the guy's friends were still on the brink of death and asked if he had more resilience than he looked. The mercenary immediately began brown-nosing, telling the captain he could call him Weasel or even older brother if he wanted. As the sun fully dipped below the horizon, they arrived at a small village called Noctville in the outer Kasseritic region. The mercenaries began whispering that the entire village was completely empty and wondering if everyone had run away together. One hooded figure whispered about the work of demons, but another quickly silenced him, telling him not to say such cursed things. Aaron walked off toward the silent houses, and Weasel followed him, calling out for his older brother to wait and go together. A black crow cawed ominously from a dead tree as they walked into the ghost town. Weasel asked where everyone had gone, but our protagonist remained silent. Suddenly, Weasel stepped in something wet and looked down with a confused, "Huh?" It was a massive pool of blood. Aaron told the Weasel not to look up, but the advice came too late. The mercenary looked up and saw the horrific sight of the villagers' corpses hanging from the rafters. A dark, evil miasma began to swirl through the air, and Weasel immediately began to puke from the sheer horror. A calm, chilling voice suddenly called out for Guard Captain Aaron. The unit leader turned around and saw a woman standing alone in the middle of the carnage, her eyes glowing with a sinister light. Aaron's blood ran cold as he realized he was looking right at Lady Vivian. The cold reality of the massacre hung heavy in the air as the convoy set up camp. The smell of simmering stew clashed horribly with the stench of death nearby. A group of mercenaries sat around the pot. One noted this was the first time he'd ever seen a stew with this much meat in it. His buddy agreed. If the food had been awful on top of everything else, he would have deserted right then and there. Weasel sat nearby, looking like he was about to lose his lunch again. He couldn't understand how these guys could be so laid back and eat after seeing those horrific corpses. He wondered which crazy bastard could have done something so demonic to those villagers. A voice from the shadows answered that it was a sacrifice. John, the commander of the convoy, walked into the firelight. He explained that what they found was a kind of ritual where humans are offered up to demons. John sat down and asked if the two of them had eaten yet, offering a sip of wine from his flask. Aaron stayed leaning against a wheel, coldly stating he would pass because alcohol only dulled his senses. Weasel, on the other hand, had zero chill and shouted that he never turned down a free drink, grabbing the flask immediately. Our protagonist warned the red-haired coward that if he threw up again, he would kill him on the spot. John introduced himself as the commander and admitted he hadn't seen their faces before, asking if they were mercenaries. Aaron didn't miss a beat, claiming he wasn't a mercenary but was just doing some part-time work for the coin. John looked at him skeptically, repeating, "part-time," under his breath, but told them both to eat well and rest whenever they could. He warned that this journey might be tougher than anyone expected. Suddenly, a commotion broke out. Someone told the group to look over toward the carriage. Lady Vivian stood there with Sir Ben and her handmaidens. The mercenaries began whispering that she was known as the Flower of the East. Weasel and John both marveled at how beautiful she was, but the weary captain remained silent. He had a feeling this wasn't just an ordinary escort mission, but he definitely didn't expect Lady Kasseritic and her high-tier knight to be tucked away in that carriage. He approached her, asking bluntly why she was here. Vivian laughed it off with a bright smile, claiming she was just out for a little outing because staying inside the castle was suffocating. She explained she was heading to Bolt Fortress on her father's suggestion, but the unit leader narrowed his eyes. The Lord himself? Sir Ben stepped in, putting a hand on Vivian's shoulder and telling the captain that was enough. The knight leaned in with a sharp, dangerous smile, warning Aaron that knowing too much comes with heavy responsibilities and that he should only know what is appropriate for his position. He made it clear that Aaron was just a captain of the guards and nothing more. Later, back by the fire, John noted that the Lord had sent the lady to the fortress for safety, but he found it weird how oddly calm Aaron seemed. He asked if the thought of a demon appearing didn't scare him at all. The hardened veteran looked at the fire and pointed out they had a knight on their side, a member of the Empire's elite force trained solely to fight demons. But in his head, he knew better. He gripped the hilt of his blade, knowing that as long as he had this sword and even the slimmest chance of survival, he had always made it out alive. He looked into the flames, thinking that unfortunately, the world didn't always play fair. John simply wished him luck as the fire began to die down. In a sudden haze of memory or perhaps a vision, Aaron saw himself walking through a dark room, picking up a red book. A young, bright-eyed boy named Horn looked up at him, shouting, "Yes, sir." With a big smile, the weary captain noted in his mind that it had been quite a while since they last saw each other and that Horn must have grown taller. He snapped back to reality as a shadow lunged at him in the dark. Aaron reacted with peak instinct, his blade flashing as he slashed through a grotesque, pale monster. He looked down at the twitching corpse, wondering what the hell it was and if it was some kind of zombie. He scratched his head, wondering where it suddenly came from, when a scream erupted from the darkness. Weasel was frantically swinging his weapon, screaming for the monster bastard to get the fuck away from him. Aaron stepped in and ended the threat with a single clean cut, a spray of black blood covering the ground. Weasel fell to his knees, calling out for his older brother in a panic. The rogue captain told him to stop freaking out for a second and asked where everyone else was. Weasel cried out that they were completely fucked because the mercenaries, the soldiers, and everyone else were all asleep and wouldn't wake up. He claimed it was like they had been put under some kind of sleeping spell. Aaron's eyes narrowed as he realized the truth. It wasn't magic. They had drugged the stew. Since he didn't eat and Weasel was too busy drinking wine, they were the only ones left standing. He realized the goal wasn't to kill everyone but to capture someone alive, and that someone was definitely Lady Vivian. He felt a presence behind him and turned to see a massive crowd of the undead shuffling toward them. Weasel looked like he was about to faint, whimpering that they were definitely dead. Dozens of glowing-eyed zombies let out a collective roar that shook the trees. Aaron put a hand on Weasel's shoulder. "It's time to come out." He drew his sword with a chilling grin, deciding he would warm up with these slow-ass zombie bastards before the real game started. He became a whirlwind of steel, his blade carving through flesh and bone in a series of blinding slashes. He cut through the horde like they were nothing, blood and limbs flying through the air as he told the monsters that this was the army's wake-up call. The rain began to fall, washing the gore off his face as the last of the initial wave fell. He stood in a circle of corpses, but then he heard a familiar dragging sound. He turned his head, noting that there was still one left. A small, ragged zombie stumbled toward him, letting out a low groan. Aaron's expression shifted as he looked at the creature's face. He noted that as he expected, the boy had grown a bit taller. He stood face to face with the undead remains of Horn, the boy from his memories, who was now nothing more than a mindless monster. Our boy gripped his sword tight as the rain poured down on the tragic reunion. 2 years ago, our boy was laying low in a quiet village, hiding from the shadow of his chasers. A kid suddenly popped up, excitedly calling him Mr. Knight. Aaron looked back with a lazy smirk, asking the kid who the hell he was calling a knight. The boy, Horn, was the son of a local farmer and a total bookworm who claimed he saw it in a book that knights were strong and cool. The hardened veteran was just chilling against a rock when Horn told him he was the strongest and coolest person he had ever seen. Captain Aaron told him he really loved to talk nonsense, but he couldn't help but ruffle the kid's hair as Horn told him to stop it. Our protagonist actually liked him. Even after settling in the Kasseritic fortress, the weary captain still made time to visit the boy. Horn's eyes sparkled when Aaron told him about a massive library in the city where librarians were buried between books all day long. The kid immediately shouted that he wanted to do that, to be a librarian. The rogue captain chopped wood as he told the boy that for a bookworm like him, it would be a perfect fit. Some say that demons feed on human fear, but right now, a monster was feeding a blade to a nightmare. He delivered a massive vertical slash that carved through the zombie version of Horn. He remembered the last time he saw the kid alive, his face covered in bruises from a beating. Horn explained his father hit him because the man believed the son of a farmer could only be a farmer. The unit leader told him that wasn't true. Some say demons eat human despair, and right now, the despair was thick enough to drown in. The hardened veteran knelt in the mud and blood, pulling the monster that used to be his friend into a final embrace. He whispered that he wasn't a knight, he was just a fortress guard captain. He stood up in the rain as Weasel came running, screaming for his older brother. The red-haired coward shouted that he woke up all the guys who were sleeping around. The guards and mercenaries charged in, stabbing and beating the zombies as Weasel ordered them to wipe out the whole horde. One zombie let out a final screech before the weary captain put his hand over Horn's eyes, telling him to just rest in peace. He muttered that he hoped nothing more would happen after death as the battle raged on around him. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the village, and a building erupted in a pillar of fire. Aaron realized that was the building where the young lady was staying. He gripped the hilt of his sword with enough force to crack bone, declaring he would avenge the kid. He walked toward the flames like a man with nothing to lose. Inside the manor, a guard's throat was slashed in a spray of red. Bodies were piled on the floor as Sir Ben stood among the carnage, his secret mission to Bolt Fortress going south fast. Ben was bleeding from his arm, noting that the rumor about someone targeting the young lady was true. He never expected them to target a secret procession like this. A massive demon with a giant, eye-covered red arm loomed over him. Ben tried to stay heroic, trash talking that holding a sword to protect a lady is the happiness and romance of a knight, even if the opponent is a wicked demon. He told the disgusting fellow to step back, but the demon just laughed. The monster called him a knight that likes to yap, pointing out that even with that nonsense, his wounds wouldn't heal quickly. He revealed the dagger was coated with a vicious poison and that Ben had eaten the drugged stew, meaning his mind must be foggy. The demon asked if the knight really thought he had a chance. Ben flexed his pride back, telling the beast that his actions were just as vile as his ugly appearance. The demon called him a son of a bitch, his eye-covered arm pulsing with power as he told Ben to be careful with his words. The monster lunged with a speed that defied his size. Ben realized his aura was barely noticeable, but he noticed the guy only had demonic erosion on one arm. He decided to provoke the beast and target the areas that hadn't transformed yet, thinking there was still a chance to win. Ben lunged in and drove his rapier deep into the demon's chest. The monster coughed blood but just stared him down. He asked if the fraud really thought he would die if he stabbed a part of the body that hadn't transformed yet. The demon grabbed Ben by the throat, hoisting him into the air and mocking him, asking if he really thought he'd die in the hands of a mere knight. Ben was choking, blood leaking from his mouth, when a voice cut through the air. Aaron appeared like a shadow behind the monster, coldly stating he came to avenge Horn. The hardened veteran unleashed a massive horizontal strike that tore through the darkness. He looked the demon in the eye, telling the bastard to accept his fate however he liked. The hardened veteran didn't give the beast a second to breathe, telling the monster to take it like a man before his sword connected with a blinding flash of light. The demon let out an ear-piercing scream of agony, his pride shattered as he demanded to know who the hell this human was. Aaron didn't answer with words, meeting the demon's eye-covered arm with a bone-jarring impact that sent sparks flying through the burning manor. The creature was suddenly engulfed in a surge of red lightning, clutching his head in a panic and cursing the situation. He was losing it, screaming, "Damn it," and asking what the hell this power was. The demon was low-key falling apart, crying about how because of some bastard who wasn't even a knight, he ended up wasting his precious blood. Meanwhile, Lady Vivian was still out cold, a total nepo baby oblivious to the ritual being planned in the shadows. The demon realized he needed to hand over that woman quickly before he ran out of the blood offered as a sacrifice. He looked at the wreckage, wondering if that kid Horn had already turned into a zombie and what this meant for his master's plan. But our guy wasn't done, roaring that this revenge was for him as he lunged forward with a flaming sword that lit up the entire room. The rogue captain became a blur of motion, his blade carving through the air and sending the demon flying into the debris with a massive shockwave. Blood sprayed against the floor as the demon looked up in total disbelief. Aaron stood his ground, leaning on his sword like a true boss and telling the beast to heal up quickly because every time he recovered, the human cleaner would just cut him down again. The demon was absolutely mauling, screaming, "Fucking hell," and calling the captain a little fly-like bastard. As the demon's chest bled out, he realized something was horribly wrong. He felt his own blood being sucked back into his eye-covered arm, realizing with horror that he was being consumed by his own power. Our protagonist spat out some blood, looking down at the creature with total disdain. He mocked the monster, asking what the hell happened since he thought the beast could take a hit or two. But now he realized the demon was nothing but a weakling. The monster gritted his teeth, his eyes glowing with rage, but the hardened veteran was already moving. He shouted that it was time for Horn's revenge and unleashed another strike that shook the building. The demon was losing his mind, screaming about what kind of crazy bastard would go this far for some kid named Horn. He wondered where a non-knight was getting this kind of insane strength, his claws clashing against Aaron's blade with a heavy metallic ring. The unit leader noted that the monster wasn't just a big target after all. Suddenly, John, the convoy commander, appeared from the smoke, his eyes glowing a sinister red. Aaron realized the fraud was finally crawling out of his hole, and John laughed, praising him for being sharp. The weary captain called him out immediately, saying John looked like a bear but was actually a sneaky fox. He accused the commander of being behind the whole ritual, pointing out that since the villagers were sacrificed and John showed up right on time, he was clearly the one in charge. John dropped the act, growling that if it weren't for the guard captain, this would have all been over by now. They locked blades, but in the background, a dark voice whispered to the demon that it was too late. The demon screamed, "What?" But the voice told him his body was no longer needed. The monster begged for mercy, promising to offer the blood right now, but the entity had already found a more delicious-looking body. Aaron's sword suddenly let out a dull clack, and he cursed the cheap steel, realizing it had gotten dull fighting that demon. John saw the opening and lunged, shouting that it was over and telling our guy to die. But the hardened veteran was built different, leaning back and delivering a real counterpunch that nearly took John's head off. John was sent reeling, coughing up blood and realizing this kind of guy wasn't in his calculations. Our protagonist stood over the fallen commander, but the nightmare was just getting started. A massive shadowy demon rose from John's remains, completely devouring him. The new monster loomed over the room, a pitiful creature that Aaron demanded answers from. The great being spoke in a voice that rattled the walls, declaring it would take him from now on and asking what the captain would do now. The entity mocked him, pointing out he didn't even have the strength to swing his sword and wasn't even a knight. Aaron's sword clattered to the floor, but he didn't back down. He lunged with his bare hands, grabbing the beast and screaming about those disgusting huge eyes. He used every ounce of his remaining strength to tear them apart, and the entity actually laughed, calling him impressive. In that moment, a memory of his mercenary days flashed through his mind. He saw his old squad at a tavern, with the gladiator goal guy demanding his money back from the gambler Wei. Mage Avery was there too, and a beautiful redhead told Wei to give back the money he won. Aaron smiled at the comrades from his mercenary days, remembering when Wei asked how he could give back the money he won. The deputy commander delivered a playful punch to the gambler, and a hand ruffled his hair, calling him kiddo. He saw his commander standing tall despite being riddled with arrows and swords, telling him he hadn't forgotten the most important rule. He told him he must survive at all costs. Back in the present, a giant eye surrounded by chains stared down at the guard captain, a voice from the void declaring that he was truly delicious. Aaron wondered how he could ever forget that haunting voice. A blond man with his eyes scratched out of existence appeared in a haze, calling him commander and asking if he had forgotten the promise. He reminded him that he must survive at all costs, standing over a field of burning corpses as the nightmare reached its peak. Our guy woke up with a sharp gasp, sweat pouring down his face as the vision finally broke. He looked up and saw Sir Ben standing by the window, noting that he had finally woken up. Ben asked if he had come to his senses yet, calling him Captain Aaron. The knight seemed relieved that the unit leader was still alive, while the hardened veteran thought that should have been his line. Ben admitted he thought Aaron had already died since his presence was getting weaker and weaker by the second. Our hero sat up and checked his chest, confused as to why his body felt perfectly fine after such a hellish fight. Ben explained he found the rogue captain unconscious when he finally came to. He looked over at the charred remains nearby, noting that the demon was also lying dead right next to him. Ben's eyes narrowed with suspicion, asking if it was Aaron's doing. The weary captain gave a flat apology, claiming he didn't remember anything at all. He shrugged it off, stating that as long as the thing was dead, the method didn't really matter. He then cracked his neck and moved on to the real prize. Aaron looked toward the bed where Lady Vivian was out cold, asking what this reckless young lady had to do with those demons. Ben looked over his shoulder, noting she seemed to have no idea her life was on the line since she was just sleeping comfortably. He coldly told the captain that wouldn't be his business. Aaron just waved it off, saying he saw how it was, though the knight wondered what was up with the way a common guard talked to a high noble. Ben decided it was time for a proper intro, revealing he was a knight from Bolt Fortress and offering a sincere thanks to Captain Aaron. Our protagonist just stared up at the ceiling, telling him there were no worries. Outside, the sun began to rise over a grim scene as the smoke cleared. Aaron watched as the villagers' bodies were cremated, thinking about how an entire village was sacrificed just to summon a demon for Lady Kasaridik's life. He noted the unusual smell of the smoke as the flames roared high into the morning sky. Once the grim task was done, the procession turned around and began the trek back to Kasaridik. They agreed to say Ben was the one who took care of the demon to keep things clean. Since they were the only two who saw the truth, Aaron thought this arrangement was more convenient for everyone. He knew if people found out he came in contact with a demon, the situation would escalate and the church would start a messy investigation. He felt he survived this time and was getting compensated, so it was a total win-win. Suddenly, Weasel lunged at his arm, shouting, "Brother," and asking why he was walking so quickly. The rogue captain realized this persistent punk had survived by hiding under a pile of bodies, looking more like a lucky cockroach than a mercenary. Aaron told him to go away with a shove, wanting to be done with this substitute mission. But fate had a different plan for our fellow. Later, back in his room, the unit leader stripped off his shirt and looked in the mirror, letting out a heavy curse. He trembled, asking what the hell was happening as his skin began to crawl. A literal eyeball had grown out of his collarbone, looking back at him with a pink, crystalline iris. The demon eye pulsed, greeting him with a creepy, "Hey," and asking how he had been. Aaron didn't hesitate, grabbing a dagger and trying to gouge the thing out of his skin. The eye didn't even flinch, calling the sensation refreshing and mockingly asking if he could go a little higher with the blade. Aaron screamed at it to shut up, slamming his fist into the wall and swearing under his breath. Downstairs, Henna heard the crash and wondered what the hell was going on. The weary captain slumped onto his bed, realizing that the demon must have latched onto him when he bit it off during the fight. He asked the parasite if it was the demon from that time, but the voice inside his head claimed that was just what the ignorant ones called it. Our protagonist realized this was probably why he lost his memories of the fight. The eye told him not to get it wrong, claiming it was taking over his body through its own will. Aaron told the thing to fuck off to another person's body already, threatening to skin his own flesh to get rid of it. The demon wasn't impressed, stating it takes time to move hosts, specifically around 100 years. Aaron called it a motherfucker, raising his blade again in a rage. The demon laughed, saying having it around wouldn't be too bad and deciding to show him its true self. Suddenly, the room exploded with a surge of teal energy. Aaron was blown back as a massive, tree-like entity with a giant eye manifested in a vision. The unit leader gasped, realizing he was seeing a literal aura. He couldn't believe a demon had the power that only high-tier knights possess. The eye pulsed with light, asking if he saw the potential. But then, the magic fizzled out into a pathetic little puff of steam. The eye shriveled up, and Aaron stared at it in dead silence. He realized this guy was a complete weakling who was just talking big. Suddenly, the door to the room nearly got kicked in as Henna started screaming his name. Aaron panicked, pulling the sheets over his chest because he was screwed if she saw a talking eye on his collarbone. Henna shouted for him to come down for a minute, informing him that someone from the Kaseritic Catholic monastery was looking for him right now. This aggressive guard asked if the target was on the second floor and told Henna to get out of the way, pushing the poor woman aside like she was nothing. The armored jerk barked that a commoner shouldn't hesitate when nobles called, his voice booming through the inn. He screamed that Sir Ben was looking for him and demanded that the guard captain come down quick. But Aaron wasn't about to let some mid-tier goon disrespect his home, so he suddenly lunged forward and grabbed the guy's face with a grip that definitely broke a few nose bones. Our boy leaned in with a terrifying smirk, mockingly noting that the guy still had that same ugly face on him. The hardened veteran addressed him as Jace the Halfie and told the trash to just lie down and wait for a bit while he got ready. Jace could only mumble out that Aaron was a crazy motherfucker while being crushed against the floor. Once he was dressed, the unit leader headed down the stairs where Henna was waiting with a look that was way too thirsty. She did a little hair flip and suggested he come home early because she recently learned a massage technique that would make him feel real good. The rogue captain didn't even blink, dryly offering to let her do it if she paid him 50 copper instead. Henna's seductive vibe vanished instantly as she snapped that she didn't need it, watching as the captain dragged a half-conscious Jace out the door by his collar. As the door slammed shut, she desperately yelled out that she would do it for 40 copper, but the deal was already dead. Walking through the bustling streets of the city, our protagonist thought to himself that he had actually been a little scared, but it turned out it was just Sir Ben calling for him. He wondered if the knight was actually going to give him a reward for secretly carrying the team and defeating that demon. Inside a lavish office, Aaron sat across from the silver-haired knight and asked if he was really okay after the battle. Ben stood by a pile of rubble and brought up the glorious achievement of defeating a demon, reminding Aaron that he was the one letting Ben take all the credit and the title. The captain just shrugged it off, claiming he didn't want things to become noisy or complicated. He flashed a greedy grin and suggested that if Ben felt bad about stealing the clout, he could just share some of the rewards, thinking to himself that he would never refuse free money. Ben laughed and promised that if he ever received a formal reward, he would definitely call him over. The knight looked at our guy and thought that he was surprisingly sharp for a simple guard. Meanwhile, the mercenary captain stared back at Ben, his mind drifting toward the concept of aura. He knew aura was a broken power used to destroy evil and enforce justice, a miracle ability granted only to the elite knights handpicked by the Empire. The method for training this power was a total secret, but something felt eerie to him because the demon's power felt strangely similar to that holy energy. Back on the road, the weary captain asked Haffy how much further they had to go, and Jace snapped back that they were almost there. Jace then asked what the hell Haffy even meant, and Aaron explained with a smug look that it meant half of a half-noble, the perfect nickname for the bastard of a noble's bastard. Jace looked like he was about to cry from the soul-crushing trash talk, whispering to himself that he was going to kill Aaron one day. They finally arrived at the massive solar church hall, and the captain felt his heart sink as he realized he was walking into a holy cathedral while literally carrying a demon parasite on his chest. Sir Ben was waiting inside in his shiny blue armor, greeting the captain and saying he had been waiting. Aaron looked around nervously, thinking he was about to be exorcised and sent straight to the afterlife. He grumbled that the place put him in a bad mood, but Ben ignored the salt and introduced Priest Blean. The priest was a round, cheerful-looking man who gave a warm welcome to Brother Aaron. Then, the heavy hitters arrived as Ben introduced Joanna the Inquisitor. She was a tall, imposing woman who radiated deep religious faith, and she stared so intently at our hero that he felt sweat dripping down his neck. He panicked, wondering if she had already noticed the eyeball on his collarbone, but before he could react, she reached out and touched his forehead. Aaron froze in confusion, but Priest Blean laughed and explained that the Inquisitor had simply extended her hand of blessing, even claiming he was jealous of the captain. The human cleaner realized it was just a boring religious ritual, but the demon eye under his shirt started screaming in his head, demanding to know how a god's underling dared to place their dirty hands on it. The parasite admitted the blessing was actually very effective and painful, which was a nice bonus. Joanna eventually spoke up, noting that Sir Ben told them everything about how the captain refused to take credit for the demon kill. Blean presented an ornate chest, calling it a small gesture from the church to tribute his achievements. Aaron's jaw dropped when he saw the church's golden brooch surrounded by piles of gold coins. He played it humble, asking if it was really okay to accept such a legendary item, and the priest told him to take it without worry. All the church wanted in return was for Aaron to lend his strength if they were ever in dire need, which Blean claimed was a rare occurrence. Our boy had heard rumors that Blean was a corrupt power broker, but seeing the gold changed his mind instantly. He grabbed his face in dramatic fashion and declared that from today onwards, Blean was his father of faith. He started glazing the priest, calling him a true religious person of the era and screaming long live the Solar Church. Blean loved the energy and laughed along, while Joanna just stood there looking at him like he was a total fraud. Later on, the captain was back at a tavern wearing full, strangely shiny red armor with the golden brooch pinned to his chest. His subordinate, Kale, looked at him with pure suspicion and asked if he had bullied someone or stolen their belongings to afford that gear. The captain told Kale to shut it and suggested he take off his tacky flower scarf first. Kale got defensive, claiming Rosa bought it for him. The unit leader flexed his new drip, explaining the brooch was a gift filled with the energy of the sun god and the armor was bought with sacred gold. Kale just sighed and told him he should probably just pay his bar bills with that money instead. A beautiful pink-haired waitress named Charlotte arrived with a glass of beer, and the captain thanked her as she leaned in. Charlotte asked if a guy named Brig was coming today, and Kale explained he was off duty. When Kale teased her about being interested in the man, she admitted it was hard to find a good man like Brig and mentioned she was going to give him a massage that would make him feel good. Aaron nearly choked on his beer, wondering if Henna learned her massage moves from this girl. Charlotte then changed the subject, mentioning that a group of scammers had appeared lately at the Sick Mermaid Inn in District 5. She explained that outsiders were gambling there and a little girl was dominating the dice rolls. At the gambling den, a man screamed in disbelief as a hooded kid rolled a 6 for the 5th time in a row, accusing her of a scam. Back at the tavern, the captain slammed his mug down and called the kid cheeky, acting all righteous about a minor gambling in his district. He claimed that as a captain of the guards, he couldn't just sit and watch this happen. Kale tried to stop him, knowing the captain just wanted to go gamble the church's money away. Our guy grabbed Kale by the neck and dragged him toward the door, wearing a devious smile and claiming they were going to eradicate the gambling, while Kale begged him to stop lying because everyone knew he just wanted to join the game. Aaron arrived at the Sick Mermaid Inn with Kale in tow, his eyes scanning the shady dive for his target. The hardened veteran took a deep breath before kicking the door open, announcing his arrival with a loud shout that echoed through the tavern. The people inside froze in terror, a glass shattering on the floor as someone gasped out the captain's name in pure shock. Joseph stood up, sweat dripping down his face as he asked how the hell our boy was even there. He reminded the weary captain that he was supposed to have quit gambling for good, but the unit leader just smirked, soaking in the smell of the room and asking which way the gambling table was. He told Joseph he was just there for one last round because, for the first time in forever, he actually had a massive pile of cash to burn. The human cleaner walked over to the table where a hooded kid sat, noting he had heard she was quite the dice pro. He sat down, dropped a bag of coins, and told her to show him her skills. The girl started her ritual, chanting a little song under her breath while shaking the cup until she slammed it down. Aaron lifted his own cup and saw a 6, realizing they had tied again. The rogue captain suggested they add more to the pot and go for double or nothing, and the girl agreed, secretly thinking the captain was a total idiot. She figured he had become arrogant after she lost a few rounds on purpose, and now he was just throwing money left and right like a fool. She signaled her goons to start the harvest, knowing he could not possibly dream that she could change the dice at will with magic. She prepared to suck up every penny he had, but our protagonist suddenly told her to stop right there. The captain asked her point blank if she was trying to cheat using magic, and the kid's eyes widened in horror. He continued drinking his beer, claiming he had proof because she was definitely going to give him a 4 to end the game. He told her she would have rolled a 4 for herself too, and the girl accidentally knocked her cup over, revealing a blue 4 exactly like he predicted. Aaron slammed his own cup down, showing his own red 4 and proving he was right. The monster of the inn told her he would bet all his money and even his own hand that she used magic, telling her to fuck off if she was scared. He noted that it was a classic move, using a young mage to run a filthy scam gambling ring. The leader of the group finally stepped up, pulling a dagger and admitting he thought Aaron was an idiot, but since he knew their secret, things were going to get shorter. He threatened that if the captain did not want to die right now, he should drop the cash and get lost. But our guy just chuckled, asking if they never learned not to bet on things they were not sure of. He pulled out a gold coin from the solar church and flipped it, telling the trash that if even one of them actually knew who he was, they would not be doing this. He claimed the game with the kid was fun, so he offered one more round with the real gold coin, which was worth a staggering 500,000 copper. The goons nearly lost their minds, seeing a holy gold coin for the first time in their pathetic lives. The leader growled, asking what kind of game the hardened veteran was trying to pull, unable to believe he was still willing to play even after knowing they were scammers. Aaron just told the guy to shut up, wondering why the world's biggest scammers talked so much. He mockingly asked if the guy was scared, which caused the leader to slam a massive axe into the table. The villain bet all the money against the girl's hand, warning Kana that if she messed up this round, she was losing her limb. While the dice were shaking, the unit leader casually asked the kid why she was roped in with these bastards, wondering if magic did not fit her or if she was just too poor to afford the academy. Kana snapped, telling him not to assume her situation when he did not know anything, and the weary captain just smirked, knowing he was right. The leader realized Aaron was just stalling for time and told him they were not letting him leave alive the moment he lifted that cup. But our hero had one last question, asking if she could make beer cold with magic. Kana looked confused but confirmed she could use basic ice magic, and the captain's face went dark with a terrifying grin as he simply said, "Okay." Suddenly, the dice game turned into a bloodbath as the leader shouted for his men to kill him. The captain moved like a blur, and while the dice were still in the air, he started crushing skulls. He did not even need a weapon, using his bare hands to send bodies flying across the room. He grabbed the leader by the throat, calling them medieval bastards for living off a little girl and telling them they should be ashamed of themselves. One of the goons tried to use dark magic, but the monster of the inn was too fast, ending the man before the spell could even finish. The girl watched in horror as he defeated everyone in the room with nothing but his fists. Kale walked in, noting that his boss always ended up in a fight during dice games and reminding him that was why he was banned in the first place. The captain ignored him, flipping a coin and identifying the leader as a wanted assassin named Shaq. He walked over to the kid, calling her Fridge Kid, and asked if she wanted to earn some money. Kana begged for her life, but the captain told her that if she made him a cold glass of beer every day, he would give her a job with room and board until she could enter a magic academy. He held out his hand, asking if she wanted to come with him, and the girl finally took it, agreeing to join the crew. The sun was barely peeking over the horizon as Aaron started his morning training, his back muscles looking absolutely shredded as he swung his sword in the early mist. Kana approached with a nervous look, and our hero acknowledged her as Mini Fridge before she could even say a word. The purple-haired mage stood there with a tray, telling him to have some beer in a voice that sounded like she had not slept in a week. The hardened veteran took the mug with a rough grip and chugged the whole thing, letting out a satisfied shout that it hit the spot. He patted the kid's head and asked how old she said she was, and when Kana muttered that she was 12, the unit leader acted surprised. He asked why she was so small and if she was actually a dwarf, but he was interrupted by Henna screaming from the porch. The landlady demanded to know if the kid was his daughter, which caused our protagonist to literally spit his beer out in shock. Aaron wiped his mouth and asked what she was even talking about, explaining that she was just a mage he found off the streets. Henna crossed her arms, noting that the whole situation was totally out of the blue, but Aaron told her to just consider the kid a new employee since they were short on manpower anyway. He told her to treat the girl nicely, and Henna leaned in close, deciding there was no way such a cute kid could be related to a brute like Aaron. She grabbed Kana in a massive hug, promising that this older sister would protect her from all the mean adults from now on. The kid was visibly vibrating from the pressure as she whispered her name was Kana, and Henna immediately pivoted to the business side of things. She gave a creepy smile and asked how many cold glasses of beer Kanna could make in a single day, suggesting maybe 300 glasses would be a good start. Aaron watched the girl get bullied into a labor contract and decided it was time to head to work. His daily routine as a guard captain was basically a speedrun of chaos, starting with a visit to his boss who was currently sobbing and begging him to please stop hitting people. The rogue captain just dug in his ear and gave a lazy reply while heading to the market to maintain order. He checked the state of some apples by just grabbing one and taking a bite, telling the vendor to pack 10 more while the old couple nearby whispered that he was a crazy bastard. The old man noted that at least there were no thugs in the market thanks to him, so they just let the weary captain do his thing. Next, the human cleaner oversaw his men shaking down a smuggler who was crying that a pile of gold was all he had. The guards looked like total villains with glowing eyes, but Aaron told them to take it easy even if the guy was trash. He greeted his men with a smirk and told them to take 300 copper and keep 100 for themselves, causing the subordinates to scream, "Yahoo!" in pure joy. Eventually, the captain arrived at the fortress gate, noting that rumors about their expensive entrance fees must have spread because there were 0 visitors. A shadow suddenly appeared behind him, whispering that carnelian flowers never wither, which was some peak Chunibyo nonsense. Aaron looked back and asked if Scar sent him again, but the shadow guy told him not to speak that name carelessly, calling Scar the shadow of the Kaseritic fortress. Our boy told the guy to shut up and just say what he was there for while digging in his ear again. The messenger reported that a lot of outsiders were entering as merchants and acting suspicious, handing over a transcript from the King of Shadows. The letter claimed it had been 3 days since they entered and they were trying to hide their presence, but they could not trick a legend like Scar. The hardened veteran just crumpled the dramatic letter into a ball and chucked it away, telling the shadow to go tell Scar he did not have time for these little games. He figured that if the number of outsiders increased, it would actually be good for the economy in such a rural place. But then a carriage pulled up, and the unit leader woke up a sleeping guard named Carter, telling him it was time to make money. He stopped the carriage and was greeted by a man named Dornoa, who gave off a seriously suspicious vibe. Dornoa acted all friendly, calling Aaron handsome and claiming he thought the captain was a knight. He started rattling some coins to bribe his way in, and the weary captain realized this guy was a total professional. Carter ran up and greeted Dornoa like an old friend, explaining he had transferred from the Mozart branch. Dornoa kept the fake energy high, telling Aaron he could call him brother from now on, while slipping Carter a bottle of purple pills. Carter was hyped, claiming he got knocked out after taking them, but our protagonist grabbed the merchant's shoulder with a grip of steel. He told the guy that they had to check everything entering the fortress and asked if he had anything suspicious to hide. Dornoa sweated through his purple outfit, insisting he was clean, but Aaron's sharp eyes caught a weird tattoo on the guy's neck. Suddenly, Carter shouted for the captain to come look at something gross in the back of the wagon. Inside, they found a pile of rotting goat carcasses covered in maggots and decaying meat. Aaron asked what he was planning to do with this biohazard, and Dornoa flashed a sinister grin before quickly reverting to his nice guy act. He claimed his usual butcher died in an accident and begged for mercy, slipping even more money into the unit leader's hands. Aaron laughed it off, calling the guy really nice and letting him pass through the gate with a warm welcome to Kaseritic. As the carriage rolled away, Dornoa's face turned cold, calling the captain stupid and promising to make the place a living hell very soon. But the rogue captain just watched him go, wondering aloud if a guy like Dornoa liked high places. He looked at the transcript again, thinking that the suspicious merchants were definitely going to be a problem. Our hero gave a dark smile, noting that in this damned medieval time, things were either innocent or ended with a hanging. Aaron was feeling pretty ominous about the future, but for now, life at the inn continued as usual with his subordinates sharing some gossip. The guard captain sat at the bar, trying to get it straight that Charlotte actually gave Brig a date request. Brig slammed the table in excitement, blushing like a total schoolgirl as he confirmed that the beautiful waitress asked him to go watch an execution together. Our protagonist watched him giggle and thought that Charlotte's actions were truly remarkable, even if her idea of a romantic evening was a bit twisted. The weary captain chewed on his food, noted that even guys like Brig were going on dates, and wondered if the girl thought an execution was some kind of cultural festival. He looked out at the town square where a crowd was gathered around a gallows, mentally calling everyone there uncivilized medieval bastards. Brig didn't care about the dark vibes, bragging that he planned on gifting her the special bread his mother made. The captain's hand started shaking as he clutched his spoon, asking if he was talking about that dog shit fish bread. A visual of the bread showed 2 literal fish sticking out of a loaf of dough, and the memory alone made Aaron and Vermin look like they were about to die. Vermin actually collapsed on the floor and started puking rainbows while Brig defensively asked what was so wrong with it. He claimed it was very popular in his homeland of the Brighton Kingdom, but the human cleaner wondered if everyone in that kingdom had their noses and tongues messed up. He told Brig he was sorry to his mother, but that damned fish bread was no different from dung baked in an oven. Brig cried out that his leader was being too mean, but before they could finish their meal, Vermin was approached by the shadow messenger again. The guy whispered that carnelian flowers never wither, and the monster of the inn didn't even let him finish the sentence before punching him right in the face. Aaron noted that it looked like Scar was looking for him again and told Brig to just be happy with his weird bread while he walked out. The guard captain dragged a guy through the dark alleys until he reached a basement where a man was sitting with a giant axe. The man welcomed his friend and asked if he remembered the oath they made about ruling the shadows and the light together. This self-proclaimed Shadow King named Scar was deep into his roleplay, claiming the fulfillment of the promise was near, but Aaron just stared at him with glowing eyes and asked if he wanted to die. Our guy was not in the mood for the nonsense, especially since he was called over while eating just to listen to this crap. He mocked Scar's crappy hat and snatched it right off his head, asking if the whole squad got these as a group varsity jacket. Scar panicked and begged for his hat back, but the captain just gave him a cold look and asked if he was ever going to quit this little roleplay. Scar told him to wait and listen, reminding him of the letter about the strange outsiders. He noted that those guys were meeting up every night away from any prying eyes and he suspected something bad was going to happen soon. He told the hardened veteran they needed to be more cautious, but Aaron just pinched his cheek and asked if he was anything noteworthy. He told the kids to stay out of it because the actual guards would deal with it, then dropped a bomb by mentioning that Scar's father, Jackson, was looking for him because he hadn't been to the woodworking shop. Scar went pale at the mention of his dad and immediately told his crew they had to go, promising they would meet again next time. The unit leader watched them run away, thinking that something really was going to happen soon, so there was no harm in being careful. He headed over to a quiet house and knocked on the door, and when asked who it was, he simply said it was him. An intimidating man named Dallas opened the door with his young son Ted, and they both greeted the captain warmly. Aaron handed the kid an apple he had swiped earlier, and Ted was hyped because the armor looked even cooler than before. The human cleaner thought to himself that this household was just as menacing as usual while he sat down for a drink. Dallas thanked him for the apple and noted that the captain had caught all 6 prisoners set for execution, including members of the Karzan Lone Wolf group. Aaron played it cool, saying things just turned out that way, and noted that Ted had grown quite a bit. Dallas smiled, saying children grow day by day, and then handed over a heavy bag of gold coins. He explained that a woman named Nova sent it as an advance payment because the Lord was planning to attend the upcoming execution and requested the best skills to be shown. Dallas accepted the job, telling the captain not to worry, but then mentioned he was planning to bring Ted along to start learning the family business. Our protagonist realized the kid had reached that age, thinking about how a farmer's son becomes a farmer while the son of an executioner has to take over a job that everyone hates. He saw Ted happily practicing his knife skills on the apple and felt a heavy heart for the kid. Dallas noted that his own wife ran away because of his profession, but he thanked the captain for always treating them like normal people. Aaron laughed it off, saying the executioner was the only person he could have a proper conversation with, besides that damned underwear thief Hans. Dallas was sad to hear Hans became a criminal, but our guy just gave a grim look and noted that anyone can commit a sin. He told Dallas that if he ever became a criminal in the future, the man should make sure to cut his neck cleanly. Dallas gave a confident smirk and promised he would perform his ultimate skill on him, and the two friends shared a laugh while Ted cheered that he would be the one to do it. Meanwhile, under the cover of night, the suspicious merchants from earlier were meeting in a dark alley. They grumbled about how hard it was to move because of the guy called Scar surveilling the area and noted that their previous attack had failed. One of the cloaked figures hushed the others, pointing out that an execution was happening in the town square in a few days. Dornoa smiled wickedly, claiming they would use this opportunity to make the heart of Kaseritic theirs. One of the goons asked if a nearby guard was sleeping or dead, and we see it was just Carter, totally passed out and drooling from the pills Dornoa gave him. Execution day finally arrived at the Kaseritic town square, but instead of just blood and guts, the air was filled with the smell of fresh hops and magical frost. Kanna let out a little shout and channeled her mana, turning a lukewarm mug into a frosty masterpiece with a flash of blue light. The locals were losing their minds, shouting that the little mage was amazing and begging for another glass as they threw bags of cash at her. Kanna wiped some sweat off her brow, exhausted from the magical grind, while Henna stood nearby in full sales representative mode. She held up a loaf of bread and a spatula, shouting for everyone to try the strawberry jam bread with some wine. Our boy Aaron stood in the background, grumbling about why the hell he was even here acting like a street vendor. Henna laughed, telling him he was dead if he tried to steal the bread, and thanked him because his suggestion to sell jam and wine was bringing in a mountain of customers. The weary captain noted that Kanna's beer was also a huge hit, thinking to himself that his marketing intuitions were always correct. He knew Henna wouldn't understand if he explained the concept of marketing by association, but it was low-key genius because the bread and wine represented the body and blood of the execution. The hardened veteran watched the crowd and mentally called them uncivilized for basically dipping their bread in the vibe of a death row inmate's blood. Henna looked over and asked why he really took Kanna in, and when the rogue captain claimed it was just for the cold beer, she wasn't buying it. She noted it was rare to see him show interest in anyone, and the unit leader hesitated for a second, wondering how to explain it. A sudden memory hit him of a cold, rainy street in the modern world where he had once crouched down with an umbrella to rescue a shivering gray cat. He realized the kid reminded him of that cat, but before he could get too sentimental, a subordinate named Poole ran up and screamed at him. Poole asked why they were there working when the unit was supposed to be on break, and the captain told him to relax and think of it as undercover work. Aaron told him to report back if he spotted any suspicious people, which made the guard's eyes sparkle with excitement for a secret mission. When Poole asked where everyone else was, the unit leader noted that Brig was busy with Charlotte, Kale was definitely with Rosa, and he already knew Carter was passed out somewhere. The captain headed down to the holding cells and found Ted standing in the shadows, asking what the kid was doing in a place like this. Ted gave a cute smile and said the guests looked nervous, so he was just calming them down. The boy grabbed the bars of a cell and told the terrified, bound prisoners not to worry because his father had chopped off over 100 heads and would send them off painlessly. Our hero patted the kid on the head, calling him a nice boy, while the prisoners just squirmed in muffled screams through their gags. One guy managed to let out an angry mumble, and the weary captain asked what he was saying, though he quickly realized he didn't understand a word and didn't really care. The monster of the inn pulled out his keys with a sinister grin, declaring that time was up and it was time to go get their heads chopped. Up on the platform, Dallas looked like a total pro under the bright sun, swinging his massive axe with a single, brutal stroke. Blood sprayed everywhere as the crowd let out a massive cheer, making the hardened veteran reflect on how executions in these medieval times were basically political festivals. He knew they were used to relieve the citizens' suppressed violence while putting the ruler's authority on full display. Lord Fullputz sat on his throne looking regal as hell, and the captain noted this specific event was even more important than usual. The criminals were the bastards who killed a noble of Karzan, and since the Lord wanted to secure a diplomatic alliance, he couldn't afford any mistakes. Lady Vivian Fullputz was watching from the side with a serious look, but the unit leader felt a sudden chill, thinking that something was about to go down. He spotted a hooded figure in the crowd and his eyes widened when he saw a familiar face. It was that suspicious merchant, Dornoa, coming out from the shadows. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the square, sending people screaming as fire erupted everywhere. The rogue captain realized it was a coordinated attack as more explosions went off, and people started running for their lives in a total panic. The Lord was literally sent flying by the blast, and Aaron mockingly thought that the guy always resembled a bird, but now he was actually taking flight. Other guards started screaming to secure the Lord and get moving, while our boy stayed surprisingly calm. He realized that since he was in charge of public security, if the Lord died right here, his own head would probably be next on the chopping block. He looked over and saw Dallas still calmly finishing his job amidst the fire and screams, thinking the guy was amazing for working in this chaos. Dallas noted he was only doing his duty, which made the unit leader smile and decide it was time for him to start working too. The captain of guards charged straight into the inferno, ready to show these terrorists why they shouldn't mess with his city. Panicked citizens shrieked about the massive explosion while fire consumed the square, turning the festival into a total war zone. Aaron tried to keep his cool amidst the smoke, shouting for everyone to calm down and telling the little brats to stop running before they got trampled. Henna and Charlotte were on the front lines of the chaos too, though Henna was more worried about some guy stealing her bread than the actual fire. Our hero walked out of the thick smoke like a total boss, carrying two crying kids like they were yesterday's groceries. He asked his unit if they saw any suspicious trash hanging around by any chance, but the guards were completely useless and had zero clues. The hardened veteran scanned the crowd and spotted a hooded figure making a quick getaway with a body in his arms. He realized the target this time was Lady Vivian all along. The unit leader barked for Outer Fortress Guard Unit 4 to follow him, noting that they were next on the guillotine if they failed to catch this criminal. Cut to nighttime, where the weary captain and Vermin were patrolling the dark alleys with a lantern. Vermin was low-key whining, asking if they were just going to waste time like they did when they chased after Hans not long ago. Aaron told the guy to stop jinxing the mission, noting that he heard the Lord was thankfully still alive. The monster of the inn mocked the noble's unnaturally long life, but Vermin mentioned that a knight actually got caught in the blast and died. The rogue captain just grumbled that those bastards who call themselves knights can never be trusted anyway. He found another, and trustworthy, knight slumped against a wall, but it turned out Sir Ben actually survived, even if he was looking like total trash. Ben greeted him, and the guard captain asked if he actually got hit, trash-talking him by asking if he was really even a knight. Ben laughed it off, calling it truly embarrassing, and noted that he let his guard down because the criminal turned out to be a dark mage. Aaron poured a potion on the man's wound and listened as the silver-haired knight dropped a bomb. There was a traitor hiding among the guards. Suddenly, Kale's voice rang out in a painful scream, and they found a blue, buff monster standing over their comrades in a dark alley. The beast mocked the guards, claiming their reactions were way too much for barely getting hit once. The merchant Dornoa stepped out of the shadows with a creepy smile, holding up a finger and telling the blue monster to wait a moment because the person he was waiting for just arrived. Aaron didn't do introductions, he just crashed through the construction like a wrecking ball, noting the building quality was worse than he thought. The captain of guards grabbed the blue demon subcontractor by the throat, noting he only pushed a little bit and the guy's defense crumbled like tofu. The monster was terrified, wondering what kind of insane grip power he was dealing with as he was lifted off the ground. Our boy called the monster a total weakling compared to the demon from outside the fortress and told the blue fraud to spit everything out while he was still speaking nicely. The monster's survival instinct kicked in hard, and he immediately started snitching on everyone, claiming the dark mage was the real culprit aiming for the lady's heart. He trash-talked his own boss, calling him a fucked-up piece of shit and revealing they made a deal with a demon servant. The snitch even gave up their base location in the lawless city of Tarumba, begging Aaron to believe he was being honest. The unit leader realized the guy was basically just a demon subcontractor, and since he was so obedient, he decided to let the trash live. Aaron told his men to take him away, and the monster actually looked happy and cute as he was being hauled off to a cell. While the hardened veteran pondered Lady Vivian's true identity, a sleepy-looking Carter finally showed up in the alley. The weary captain mocked him for having a sleeping disease and told him to sleep moderately, but Carter got way too close, talking about how painful it was to be trapped in a blurry dream. Carter drew his blade with a sinister purple glow in his eyes, telling his leader he would ensure he had a dream he'd never wake up from. He whispered, "Good night, Captain," and lunged forward with a lethal strike that Aaron barely managed to block. When Aaron was younger, a famine struck the village, and things got dark fast. There was nothing to eat, so they were forced to chew on tree roots and even eat rats and cockroaches raw just to stay alive. But one day, a miracle happened and meat was finally served on the table. The family ate meat after a really long time and enjoyed every bite, except for the younger brother who was unusually sick and couldn't help with the work. Since that day, Carter hadn't been able to get a proper night's sleep even for a single day. Back in the present, Carter screamed while swinging his blade at the captain, yelling that he always worried they would eat meat without him next time. The hardened veteran blocked the strike and noted he had heard that tragic story before, calling Carter a piece of shit before slamming him back. Carter laughed like a maniac, asking if he was strong and claiming it was because he finally slept well thanks to the candy Dornoa gave him. Purple energy swirled around his hand as he flexed, and the unit leader realized the traitor had received power from a demon. Our boy noted that the piece of shit's strength and agility increased drastically, and since he was naturally gifted in fighting, he was a real threat even without training. However, the captain wore a confident smirk as he blocked a massive overhead strike, realizing Carter completely lacked experience. He mocked the traitor, saying he was like a poorly constructed wall that wasn't very solid. Carter screamed for him to shut up and threw a massive punch, but the unit leader stayed calm. The hardened veteran told Carter that he understood because he also had trouble sleeping at night, then suddenly parried the blow and pierced Carter's shoulder. He told the traitor that he forgave him, so he should forgive him as well. Carter's vision blurred as he saw a golden light and a hallucination of his younger brother reaching out to him. The traitor coughed up blood and whispered that he was sleepy before collapsing into the captain's arms. Aaron told him to sleep tight and promised to sing him the best lullaby as his last one, watching the town square explode in the distance as he held his former subordinate. Meanwhile, Dornoa was panting while dragging Lady Vivian's unconscious body through a small tunnel. The villain muttered that those persistent bastards made him go through this narrow path, but he figured it was worth it since he captured the one who was loved by Mana. He pulled out a knife, glowing with sinister light, and prepared to cut out the human heart and eat it. But the monster of the inn appeared behind him like a ghost, asking how he found the small tunnel and if Carter told him. Aaron told the bastard it was time for a quick interview, looking absolutely done with the day. Dornoa laughed, asking who he was and noting he thought a knight was chasing him. He mocked the captain, calling him a novice captain of guards while summoning massive shadow monsters including a giant snake and a wolf. Dornoa ordered the wolf to bite him, and Aaron's blade flashed as he parried the dark energy. The villain cast a magic curse that wrapped around the unit leader's arm, making the hardened veteran realize his body felt heavy and painful when he moved. Dornoa noted his body wasn't just for show, but then summoned Lord Quintel's Shadow Legion, surrounding our hero with multiple beasts. The rogue captain just smirked, asking if this was his animal farm and noting it was too small to be called a legion. The insolent bastard was enraged by the trash talk and ordered his pets to charge. Aaron looked at the Shadow Army and thought about how he should capture the guy alive according to the rules, but since he tricked his subordinates and sold them to a demon, he couldn't do that. The captain of guards gripped his sword, declaring that the son of a bitch was sentenced to immediate execution. The fight was on, and the hardened veteran immediately went to work, swinging his blade through the swirling shadows that tried to swallow him whole. Dornoa grunted in frustration as his minions failed, his face twisting with a desperate sort of malice as he channeled a massive orb of dark energy between his hands. The villain started trash talking, shouting that those crushed under the weight of punishment were nothing but sinners, before unleashing a move called suppression that sent waves of purple magic crashing down. A literal nightmare of shadow arms erupted from the ground, grabbing our hero by the legs and torso until a multi-armed freak of nature was pinning him down like a bug. Dornoa smirked, asking how that felt, and bragged that this was a triple curse even top-tier knights had a difficult time escaping from. He looked down his nose at the captain, telling him to become minced meat just as the shadow beast unhinged its jaw and bit down with a sickening crunch. But the smoke had not even cleared before the unit leader's voice cut through the air, casually asking what he just said about knights. Aaron emerged from the wreckage, glowing with a faint, dangerous light, and told the fraud that he could not hear him properly, so he should say it again. Dornoa's face went pale as he realized the guard captain was built different, but the petty bastard was not done, pulling out a red potion and screaming that this would be the end of the captain's foolishness. He smashed the bottle, releasing a pool of blood that surged upward into a massive, winged blood dragon. Dornoa flexed, claiming this was a demonic beast summoned by the cardinal's finger, and the monster let out a roar that shook the forest. The dragon slammed its tail down, shattering the earth, but the rogue captain was already on the move, sprinting up the beast's back with insane speed. He leapt into the air and brought his sword down on the dragon's skull, but the impact felt like hitting a mountain. Aaron realized he was not even making a scratch and knew that ordinary methods were not going to cut it against this broken summon. Thinking fast, the weary captain decided on a high-risk play, jumping straight into the dragon's open maw and letting the beast swallow him whole. Dornoa started cackling like a maniac, calling him a fool for walking into his own death, but inside the monster's throat, the captain was perfectly calm. He wondered why the bastard was grinning when the infiltration was actually a total success, and then he decided it was time for the next step. Tapping his collarbone, the hardened veteran told the damned demon living inside him to come out, and the demon eye immediately peeked through his skin, asking if he called. Aaron noted that the parasite was awake just as he expected, even though it had been suspiciously quiet after using its powers earlier. He even took a second to call the thing a no-bald bitch, telling it that it should at least have some shame for hiding. The demon eye took offense, calling the human disrespectful and foolish, but it admitted that the captain was fascinating. Aaron did not have time for the small talk and demanded the demon's power, and as his sword began to hum with a terrifying blue energy, the eye agreed to lend its strength. The demon had one condition, though. It told him not to call it a no-bald bitch anymore because even if it did not know the meaning, it felt strangely unpleasant. The captain sighed at how simple the bastard was and agreed, and suddenly his entire body felt like it was being struck by lightning. He realized this was the legendary aura, and a dark smirk played on his lips as he realized this was about to be fun. In a split second, massive blue slashes tore through the dragon from the inside, and the beast exploded into a rain of gore. Dornoa stood there shaking, wondering what was happening and if that was actually aura he was seeing. He could not believe it, stuttering that it was impossible for a simple guard to be a knight, but the captain just descended through the blood like a god of war. The dragon's carcass hit the dirt with a thud, and the terrified mage screamed, asking who the hell the captain was. He panicked, wondering if the Imperial family had sent him and how they found out about the plan, but Aaron just looked at his reflection in his blood-stained blade. When asked for his identity, the captain moved like a blur, his sword carving through the air and ending the villain's life in a single, brutal stroke. As the bastard's head hit the grass, the human cleaner simply called him a shithead and noted he was just a fortress guard. The forest finally went quiet under the moonlight, and Aaron sheathed his sword, standing over his fallen comrade and telling Carter to sleep well. He thought the job was done, but suddenly the dead mage's eyes glowed with a sickening pink light and a magic circle flared to life beneath the corpse. The hardened veteran turned in shock, realizing too late that this was magic that only activated after death. He cursed his luck and sprinted toward Lady Vivian as a massive pillar of demonic energy shot into the sky. He managed to grab her just in time, but as he looked up, he saw a gargantuan, horned demon emerging from the light. Sweating under the pressure, the captain realized he might have actually gotten himself into deep trouble this time. The shadow of the gargantuan demon loomed over the forest like a literal mountain of nightmare fuel, its singular glowing eye piercing through the dark as the hardened veteran clutched Lady Vivian tight. The beast did not wait for an introduction, bringing a massive red foot down with a world-shaking crash that sent earth and stone flying everywhere. Aaron barely managed to roll out of the way, hitting the dirt hard while still shielding the unconscious girl. The weary captain groaned, muttering an exhausted, "Ow, fuck," as he tried to pull himself back together. He pushed himself up from the grime, grumbling that they should at least wait to slave him around until they offered him some overtime pay. But the moment of peace was short-lived as he looked down at the girl, realizing she was still out cold, just as a blinding explosion of holy light tore through the clearing. A high-tier knight and a literal inquisitor descended like celestial reinforcements, their blades humming with enough power to make a dark mage look like a total fraud. They lunged at the demonic beast, their movements a blur of steel and divine energy that forced the monster back. The unit leader did not stick around to provide backup, instead slipping behind a thick tree to stay out of the crossfire. He peeked around the trunk, identifying the newcomers as a knight and an inquisitor, knowing that getting involved now would just bring too much heat. Lady Vivian started to stir, her eyes fluttering open as she looked up at the man who just saved her life. Our hero felt a sudden wave of panic, wondering if he had hit her too hard when he knocked her out for her own safety. Given her disheveled state, the rogue captain decided he needed to cover her up, but since he was a low-key kleptomaniac, he pulled out a floral handkerchief he had actually stolen from a guy named Kale. He draped the stolen cloth over her face like a makeshift shroud and let out a long sigh, deciding it was officially time for the guard captain to get off work. He slipped away into the shadows just as the two holy warriors delivered a final, thunderous strike that ended the demon's short-lived career. The green-haired knight stood over the massive carcass, trembling as she searched for her lady. The inquisitor pointed toward the trees, spotting a figure lying on the ground in the distance. They both sprinted over, screaming Lady Vivian's name, but stopped dead in their tracks when they saw her lying there with a flowery rag over her head. The green-haired girl looked absolutely horrified, wondering aloud if the lady was actually dead, while the inquisitor stared on in pure confusion. A week passed since the Dark Mage's chaotic attack, and the scene shifted back to the familiar warmth of the Laughing Rabbit Inn. The guards were gathered around the tables, venting their frustrations and complaining that they were never supposed to win against a dark mage anyway. They argued that if the situation was that bad, the higher-ups should have handled the inspection themselves instead of sending them into a meat grinder. The hardened veteran stood in the middle of the tavern, holding a massive wooden mug and watching over Canna as the narrator explained the aftermath of the battle. The lord who flew across the sky was miraculously unharmed, his daughter Vivian was back safe and sound, and the entire disaster was finally over. But the most important part was the false testimony Aaron gave to the authorities, claiming that Carter died a hero's death while fighting a demon. Thanks to that lie, Carter's family actually received compensation instead of being branded as the relatives of a traitor. One of the guards slammed his drink down, calling Carter a dumbass for running into a demon without an ounce of fear, but he raised his glass anyway. He noted that the guy's wish finally came true and told the fallen guard to sleep tight. Another guard chimed in, vowing to take after Carter's courage of charging toward a monster. Our boy joined in the tribute, raising his mug high and calling for a cheers to the man who kept his honor as a guard. He took a deep swing of his beer, finally feeling a bit of peace, until a guard mentioned that a new recruit was coming to replace their fallen comrade. Before the captain could even process the news, the tavern doors burst open with a loud bang, and a red-haired kid with a braid came flying in screaming, "Sire." The newcomer announced himself as Dylan, the new recruit for Outer Fortress Guard Unit 4, and gave the most energetic, flower petal-filled greeting anyone had ever seen. The unit leader just stood there with a blank stare, watching the kid laugh like a total nepo baby while his ears started to bleed. Dylan started rambling about how happy he was that their relationship as brothers was continuing, but the other guards just thought the kid had a good impression and kind of resembled the captain. The new guy would not shut up, asking everyone if he had told them the story of how he went against thousands of zombies. He claimed that if it were not for him, even someone like his big brother would have been in trouble, but Aaron just shoved his fingers in his ears and told him to shut up. The weary captain wondered how such an idiot even got recruited, but Henna told him his thoughts were actually leaving his mouth. Dylan slammed a coin on the bar, demanding another serving of beer, but he did not realize who he was dealing with. Henna stood there with a terrifyingly dark aura, prompting the kid to stutter and wait in total fear. He tried to apologize for acting like a hooligan, claiming it was just a tradition among mercenaries, but the landlady was not buying the trash talk. She let out a small pffft, telling him it was alright because clashing into bastards like him was a daily occurrence at her tavern. But then she leveled a loaded crossbow directly at his forehead, telling the fool that if he messed around again, she would blow a hole in his head. Dylan screamed an apology while our hero just watched, noting that Henna was never easy on anyone. The hardened veteran then called the kid a weasel and told him to take it, tossing him a sword and officially welcoming him to Unit 4. He leaned in with a cold look, telling the rookie to work hard or else he would be dead. Dylan's eyes filled with tears of joy as he saluted, screaming that he would work hard with everything he had. The scene faded with the narrator revealing that while Dylan joined with a warm welcome, he would eventually look back on this day years later with one single thought, that he really should have made a run for it when he had the chance. A massive fist collided with the coachman's face with a sickening crunch, sending the poor guy sprawling onto the wooden deck while Dylan stood there frozen in pure shock. The unit leader stood over the fallen man with his arms crossed, acting like he just did the guy a favor, while the rookie let out a terrified eek. Our guy leaned in close to the dazed worker, casually warning him that his face would freeze off if he kept sleeping in places like this, and told him he needed to be more careful. The coachman woke up with a trail of drool down his chin, completely confused as he stammered out a thank you, genuinely believing he had just accidentally fallen asleep on the job. Meanwhile, another carriage rumbled toward the gate, and the veteran signaled for the next inspection as Dylan watched on with wide eyes. Aaron turned to the rookie, explaining that he saw the gist of it and that they had to tighten up the inspections ever since that whole demon incident. But the new recruit was not buying the captain's noble act, shouting at him and asking if ripping off silver coins and punching people under the guise of a demon check was actually how things were supposed to be done. Dylan was having a midlife crisis at 19, wondering if this was really the duty of a guard, but the kid's morals flipped faster than a pancake the moment he saw the silver. Soon enough, the rookie was the one cornering travelers, cackling like a total villain and telling people that they could pass for the low price of 2 silver coins. Captain Aaron watched from the sidelines, low-key impressed by the kid's natural talent for extortion, thinking the guy had found his true calling. Life was good until a massive carriage with the Fenner family seal rolled up, and a beefy soldier stepped out, absolutely fuming. The guard looked like a total nepo baby bodyguard, roaring that even after seeing the family seal, these uneducated bastards still planned on inspecting them. Dylan tried to stand his ground, telling the guy that his business was none of his concern and that if he had a problem, he should just pay up. But before the kid could finish his sentence, the hardened veteran's fist connected with the soldier's jaw, sending him flying into the dirt with a loud thud. Aaron just laughed it off, telling the fuming honor-bound soldier that the kid was still new and didn't know the rules of polite society yet. The unit leader then peeked into the carriage, noting there were only soldiers inside and no nobles, which meant he could stop pretending to be nice. He looked the soldier dead in the eye and claimed it was the Lord's special order to inspect everyone due to the recent unfortunate events. The soldier was fuming, but the captain doubled down, trash-talking and claiming that since the guy dared to call their lord a fool, he clearly didn't know his place. The soldier broke into a cold sweat as Aaron leaned in with a demonic grin, while Dylan added fuel to the fire by joking that the executioner was going to be very busy today. Realizing he had accidentally insulted a high-ranking noble's authority, the soldier's attitude flipped instantly, and he pulled out a fat bag of silver. He begged for forgiveness, claiming it was all a big misunderstanding, while our hero just smirked and pocketed the loot, saying everyone makes mistakes. After another brutal punch to the gut just for good measure, Aaron waved them through, wishing them a smooth business trip while the soldier crawled away swearing under his breath. Dylan cheered as they looked at their haul, but the captain was soon called away to the solar church. He marched through the holy halls in his shiny red armor, feeling the demon eye on his neck pulse with pain as it reacted to all that concentrated holy energy. He worried that the priests might have caught on to his little parasite, but his heart nearly stopped when he saw Priest Blian and the Inquisitor waiting for him. Priest Blian greeted him warmly, and the weary captain realized they weren't there to arrest him, but to praise him for the demon fight. Apparently, the Inquisitor saw everything and reported that Aaron was a hero who protected the lady from the giant beast. The unit leader let out a sigh of relief, realizing the holy warrior hadn't seen him using the demon's broken powers. Priest Blian claimed his courage was a praiseworthy achievement and offered a reward for his strong faith. The hardened veteran's eyes lit up at the word compensation, expecting a mountain of gold, and he started sucking up to the priest, claiming his faith was nothing compared to theirs. But instead of a bag of gold, the priest draped a fancy blue and gold cape over his shoulders, naming him an honorary conventual. Aaron stood there in his elaborate new gear, looking like a total clown while internally screaming that he wanted cash instead of a decorative rag. To make matters worse, the priest dumped the Inquisitor on him, telling him to guide her around the fortress since they were basically family now. Blian bolted out of the room like a coward, leaving the captain alone with the silent, terrifying woman. Aaron was fuming, realizing the priest only called him in to handle the scraps, and he swore he would beat that pig into a pulp one day. He looked at the Inquisitor, knowing that if she found out about the demon in his collarbone, she would crack his head open with her mace without a second thought. Trying to get rid of her, he took her to a local restaurant known for the most disgusting dish in the city, fish bread. It was a literal pie with fish heads sticking out of the crust, and Aaron prayed the taste would make her leave him alone forever. He watched with a smug grin as she took a massive bite, but his jaw dropped when her expression turned into one of pure, silent intensity. He cackled internally, telling her not to resent him while wondering if he was about to get maced for the terrible food. But the Inquisitor didn't complain. She actually finished the whole thing with a terrifying focus. Aaron followed suit, forced to eat the nightmare fuel himself, and they both sat there in a food-induced coma until the chef offered them a second round for free. The Inquisitor's survival instincts finally kicked in, and she bolted out of the restaurant at Mach speed, leaving the captain behind. He took it as a sweet victory, until the chef handed him the second free pie, and he realized he had to eat it alone. He stared at the fish heads, wondering if getting his head cracked open with a mace would have been a better fate. Later back at the inn, the unit leader was still decked out in his shiny honorary gear, and his friend couldn't help but ask how his attire was getting more elaborate by the day. Aaron admitted with a smirk that the title was actually great because it got him a ton of discounts at local shops. But the peaceful moment didn't last, as news arrived that soldiers from the Fenner family, the same guys Aaron had just bullied and extorted, were being sent to work with them. The captain was told to be on his best behavior to avoid aggravated punishment, but he just shrugged it off, claiming he wasn't some kind of thug. But fate had other plans, as the fuming soldier from the gates suddenly kicked the tavern doors open, roaring at the uneducated guard bastard. The veteran just took a sip of his drink, casually asking if beating a guy unilaterally even counted as a fight. The beefy soldier roared that the captain's special orders could kiss his ass, fuming that the unit leader had the audacity to smack him over the head with such a brazen lie earlier. Aaron didn't even flinch, casually starting a countdown and muttering the number 1 under his breath while his friend panicked in the background. The guard beside him started sweating bullets, begging the captain to stop because an honorary conventual shouldn't be causing a massive scene like this in public. The mention of the title only made the soldier more confident, as the petty bastard let out a "haw" and asked if the hardened veteran was getting scared now that they were meeting face to face. He started trash talking, telling our boy to know his place as a mere guard, even going as far as to poke him in the forehead like a total fraud. The human cleaner's eyes went cold as the demon eye pulsed with malice, and he skipped straight to 3, bypassing 2 entirely to deliver a punch so fast it was basically a blur. The soldier went flying across the tavern, crashing into the wooden tables with a loud thud that left him completely unconscious. Aaron's friend just stared at the wreckage, muttering that this wasn't even a fight, while the captain corrected him by saying it was actually just a one-sided assault. The friend was more concerned about where the number 2 went, but the unit leader just shrugged it off, claiming everything was fine since he was an honorary conventual anyway. A while later, the soldier woke up with a face like a bruised plum, realizing that he had completely lost consciousness from a single blow. He acknowledged that the captain was stupidly broken and definitely wasn't someone who should be working as a mere guard captain. He thought the monster of the inn had enough raw potential to become a noble's private soldier, but then he started rambling excuses to himself, claiming he wasn't weak and that the captain was just a total freak of nature. His friend noted that the guy was just coping with his hurt pride, but the plot shifted back to the fortress gate where the unit leader was back on duty. A guard named Kale announced himself as part of Unit 4 while the soldier, now named Gelheim, apologized for his previous behavior by claiming he was just drunk. He watched as the captain continued his bizarre inspection method, which involved smacking every single traveler over the head. Gelheim noted that according to the unit leader, it was a method to identify demons, but to anyone with eyes, it just looked like a way for the hardened veteran to relieve some stress. But things got insane when a traveler's head actually started smoking, and a purple demon with glowing eyes erupted from its human disguise. The beast roared, calling Eren a puny human and asking how he dared to smack a demon in the head like that. Gelheim and Kale were floored, realizing that the captain's crazy method actually worked and that he had somehow sniffed out a monster by pure instinct. Eren just stood there with a terrifying look on his face, internally screaming in shock because he was actually just hitting people for no reason at all. Thankfully, the demon was just an insignificant lackey, but the fact that another one appeared only a week after the last incident turned the whole fortress upside down. That day, Eren watched as the strongest warriors of Kaseritic gathered in one place, including the Inquisitor and a cigar-chomping veteran who looked like he came straight out of a high-tier dungeon. The Inquisitor went to work, and the unit leader almost felt sorry for the demon as he watched the holy warrior tear it apart, though he made a mental note not to feed her any more fish bread. Later, the hardened veteran returned to the inn, where that weasel Dylan greeted him with an annoying amount of sparkles, asking if he wanted to take a bath first. Eren looked at the rookie with pure disgust, wondering why the hell he was there, until Henna explained that the kid kept coming back to apologize, so she told him to start working if he was really sorry. The inn was currently drowning in customers thanks to the cold beer being produced by Kanna, our favorite mini-fridge. Eren took a massive swing of his drink, letting out a satisfied roar and thinking that beer was always best served cold. He looked at the purple-haired mage, thinking it was a total waste for someone with her magic potential to be used as a literal refrigerator. He knew that magic books were expensive and hard to obtain, but he started wondering if it was finally time to start upgrading her skills. Meanwhile, a carriage rumbled toward the gate, carrying a group of sketchy guys named Furus, Lebi, and Jacob. They were grumbling about having to travel all the way to the countryside to find a specific person, complaining that their boss had a chronic illness of never letting go of things he wanted. The leader of the group told everyone to shut their mouths and control their expressions, especially Jacob, who looked like he was itching for trouble. Lebi, the driver, tried to keep things low-key, reminding the others that while they used threats to get on the carriage, they would be in deep trouble if the guards caught them during the inspection. Furus wasn't worried, claiming that Kaseritic only performed rough inspections and would let them pass for a single silver coin. But when they reached the gate, they were met by 5 guards instead of the usual 2, including a very eager Dylan. Lebi tried to play it cool, greeting a guard named Pool and claiming he was just a peddler who had been resting due to a fever. He handed over a silver coin, but the rookie guard interjected, shouting that since they had 3 extra guards on duty, they should be receiving a lot more money to share with the boys. Lebi panicked, offering even more cash just to get inside the walls, desperate to escape the suspicious guys hiding in the back of his carriage. Captain Eren watched the whole exchange from a distance with his arms crossed, while his friend asked if he heard the news about the new inspection methods. Ever since the unit leader succeeded in filtering out the demons, the commander had ordered that everyone in every carriage had to be individually inspected. Dylan took the lead, wielding a massive wooden bat and telling the travelers to get ready because he was going to blow them down first. He slammed the bat into a traveler's face, making the thugs in the carriage think the guards were completely stupid for beating anyone who looked suspicious. Eren's friend noted that the captain was the one who started this mess, but our guy defended himself, claiming he only hit people with his hands while the rookie was out here using literal weapons. Dylan stood over the fallen travelers with a bat, calling them medieval bastards who didn't know mediocrity, before he suddenly pointed at the men from the carriage and screamed that they were demon bastards. A spear whistled through the air, and blood sprayed across the deck as a brutal fight erupted instantly. Lebi looked back in horror as the inspection checkpoint turned into a total mess, while Eren casually decided he was heading off. When asked where he was going, the captain gave a dark smirk, stating he was off to upgrade the mini-fridge. But as Kanna carried a heavy mug through the tavern, a chilling thought revealed that someone was planning to snatch the kiddo and bring her to their boss. The news that someone was hunting for the mini-fridge did not reach the inn quite yet, but the atmosphere inside was already getting a bit strange as the hardened veteran approached the purple-haired mage. Kanna looked up with a nervous blush as Eren entered the frame with a grin so wide and demonic it was labeled a very kind smile, even though he immediately butchered her name by calling her Kano. The girl did not miss a beat, correcting him that it was actually Kana, and the unit leader just rolled with it as he patted her head. He asked what kind of magic she could actually pull off, and she listed out magic dice, making things cold, and some basic clairvoyance. The captain raised an eyebrow, asking if she learned her trade from a gambling addict or something, and she replied that it was a man who called himself a man who knows romance. The weary captain was not impressed, mentally labeling her teacher as a born-to-be loser mage who did not know the first thing about romance. He started to wonder if a kid like her could actually learn real spells from just a few books, but Kana was not having the doubt, shouting that she was told she learns things fast and was good at everything, even the dishes. Aaron stared at her with a heavy gaze, leading to a brief, vivid memory of a golden-haired genius who claimed she only learned magic because she was desperate and smarter than everyone else. That memory faded as the girl pleaded with him not to abandon her, but the rogue captain told her that was ridiculous and she should not say things that people could misunderstand. He asked if she was at least willing to learn, and she screamed yes with a salute, telling him to just give her the orders. The moment was ruined when that red-haired weasel Dylan burst into the tavern, screaming for his big brother and claiming they had a massive problem. The rookie was frantic, reporting that all the guys they had just caught during the inspection had somehow escaped from their cells. One of the thugs had literally bitten through his wooden shackles and fought off armed guards with his bare hands before disappearing. Dylan was losing his mind because he was the one who originally knocked the guy out, and he was terrified the monster was coming back for him. The hardened veteran just crossed his arms and told the kid that whatever happened to him was not his business, but he grumbled as a meeting was called at headquarters. Before leaving, the captain told Henna to lock the doors and instructed the mini-fridge to use her clairvoyance to keep an eye out for anyone knocking. He dragged Dylan along to the headquarters, where they found a fat, wig-wearing official screaming at the guards for being fools. A female guard suggested that maybe they should have replaced the wooden shackles with iron ones like the other fortresses, but the official just turned red, screaming that one iron shackle cost as much as 50 wooden ones. Aaron stood in the back, realizing that the thugs must have been planning something big if they could not even stay obediently locked up for a day. Sir Ben mentioned that the first guy to escape was actually a notorious fixer from Karzan, and the captain realized the weasel Dylan had actually managed to bag a high-tier criminal with his lucky head smack. Just then, a kid ran into the room, shouting and asking who the guard boss was and referring to Aaron as a scary-looking muscle man. Our boy did not appreciate the tone, grabbing the kid by the head and asking what this little shit was doing talking rudely to adults. The kid begged for help, crying that his teacher was in trouble, while the older guard explained that the guy who brought the fixer into the city was actually the coachman Lebby. The unit leader remembered the stingy guy Lebby and realized the situation was even messier than he thought. Outside in the pouring rain, the coachman was being dragged through the mud by the thugs who were complaining about the persistent guard bastards. One of the criminals wondered why they even brought the driver along, while the others realized that the Kaseritic guards were terrifying because they started bashing heads right at the gate. They figured the guards already knew who they were, which meant they were not being treated like humans anymore. A whistle blew in the distance, and the thugs panicked, running in the opposite direction only to realize too late that they were being lured into a trap. A massive silhouette stood at the end of the alley, and the criminals thought they could just push through since it was only one person. But the hardened veteran was not just anyone, and he delivered an insane strike that sent the lead thug crashing into the ground with a thunderous impact. Lebby watched in terror, wondering if the man in front of him was even human or if it was the legendary tearaway Aaron. Another thug lunged from behind with a wooden club, screaming a curse, but the captain barely moved as the weapon shattered against his power. In the dark rain, our protagonist looked like a literal devil, and Lebby truly believed he was about to die right there in the street. Aaron grabbed the terrified coachman by the collar, asking why he was screaming and why he decided to make trouble by escaping. He told the man his student was looking for him and pointed toward the street where Dylan and the kid were waiting. The rookie and the student shared a tearful reunion while the narrator noted that although the captain's actions were rough and foul-mouthed, he was not a character you could judge by normal standards. Aaron turned to the older guard, asking which direction the notorious fixer had gone, and learned the bastard was hiding out in District 5. The unit leader's expression went grim when he realized District 5 was the exact area where the Laughing Rabbit Inn was located. He hurried through the rain, knowing he had to get back to his base of operations. Meanwhile, a massive, muscular criminal was already prowling the streets near the inn, but he was stopped by a man wearing a beret and glowing red eyes. It was Scar, the woodworker friend, who announced himself as the Shadow of Kaseritic Fortress. The fixer did not hesitate, swinging a metal pipe with enough force to level a wall, but Scar managed to dodge and counter. The Karzan fixer realized the man in the beret was surprisingly strong, but he did not stop, standing over a fallen body with a bloody blade. He looked toward the inn and stated he was looking for a purple-haired girl, asking if anyone had seen her before. The Karzan fixer was a literal tank, his fists shattering the cobblestones as he lunged forward, but the guards were barely holding on. A brutal strike sent one of the men flying back as blood splattered across the rain-soaked alley. Dylan stood there trembling, screaming for everyone to run as he realized that even with 3 of them against this one monster, it was still a total wash. The rookie felt the weight of the hopelessness, crying out that this fight was impossible, and he started to apologize to Brother Poole in his head. He remembered how the blonde guard had treated him like real family instead of just a lowly mercenary, and a fire finally lit up in his eyes. He realized that those who are destined to live must actually live, so he stood his ground and roared at the fixer, calling him a son of a bitch. He shouted that he could not just leave his comrades behind and run, trash-talking the fixer by reminding the brute that he already got the living snot beat out of him once before. Dylan pointed a finger, mocking the giant for being a weak-ass bastard who fainted after getting hit just one time, and he even joked that the fixer's little siblings were probably being grilled on skewers right now. The Karzan tank was fuming, his eyes glowing with a murderous light as he brought a massive strike down on the kid, sending him tumbling into the mud. Dylan groaned in pain, wondering where the hell the captain was when things actually got serious, noting that the fucker usually showed up out of nowhere every other time. He thought that even if his miserable life was a total disaster, there had to be some meaning to it, but he could not help but scream out that Aaron was a total shithead for not being there when he actually needed him. Suddenly, a massive impact shook the entire alley as a fist collided with the fixer's face with the force of a falling meteor. The hardened veteran had arrived, looking absolutely demonic as he stood over the rookie and asked what the hell he just said. Aaron's eyes were glowing red with pure annoyance as he repeated the words, Aaron, and shithead, making it very clear that the kid was in more danger from his boss than the villain. Dylan noted that the captain's ears were ridiculously sharp before he finally gave up on life and pretended to pass out right there in the rain. The unit leader just called him a little shit and turned his attention to the fixer, noting that everyone seemed desperate to die today. He looked at the bald brute and asked if he was the same lame ass who got beaten up by a weasel earlier. Aaron even took a second to mock the guy's appearance, telling him he should brush himself properly since he had a leaf stuck on his shoulder. The fixer lunged with his sword, screaming that the captain was a despicable little brat, but the veteran just smirked. He noted that the real fool was always the one who gets deceived, and he used the distraction to land a crushing blow that sent the fixer reeling. Our protagonist did not let up, grabbing the brute and smashing him into the ground with enough power to crack the earth. He laughed, wondering how a guy like this could get knocked out by a mere weasel, and then he got serious, asking what business a Karzan fixer had in such a remote area. The brute coughed up blood and revealed he was looking for a short girl with purple hair, and the captain's expression went cold as a vision of the mini-fridge flashed in his mind. Aaron realized that the rabble he caught earlier were also from Karzan, and he mocked the person who sent them, calling them a frugal guy for sending a whole fixer just for one beggarly mage. The fixer's aura exploded into a red mist as he snarled that he would not hold back anymore unless the captain led him to the girl. The weary captain just glared, thinking that this bitch actually dared to target Purpley, and he moved like a shadow to end the fight. One final, brutal strike silenced the fixer for good, and Aaron stood in the rain, letting out a long breath and admitting that he just wanted to drink a beer. Later on, back at the guard headquarters, Dylan was busy exaggerating the entire story to the injured men, acting like he was a legendary hero. He bragged about how he called the fixer a cowardly son of a bitch and challenged him to a fight, claiming he dodged every move with a smooth slide. The rookie kept going, claiming he was the one who lodged a sword in the bastard's chest while Brother Aaron just watched, but his story died in his throat when the captain walked through the door. The hardened veteran asked how everyone's injuries were and held up a basket, claiming he brought a visiting gift. Dylan and Poole both screamed in horror when they saw the killer fish bread, but Aaron just grinned and told them to think of his sincerity and eat every last bit of it. One of the guards, wrapped in bandages like a mummy, claimed he could not eat because he was fasting, but the unit leader noted that he had brought a portion for everyone. He leaned in with a dark look, forcing the terrifying pie on his subordinates while they internally cursed their luck. Finally, the scene shifted back to the Laughing Rabbit Inn, where Dylan was busy trying to act cool and telling Kanna she was very beautiful. The captain walked in, and the mini-fridge immediately ran over to greet him with a fresh, cold beer. Aaron thanked her, saying he needed something to clean his mouth with after that disgusting fish bread, and then he looked at her with a soft expression. He asked if she had any dreams for her future, like becoming a knight or a lady of a house, or even an air conditioner. Kanna looked at him with big, honest eyes and simply said that she just wanted to live. The hardened veteran let out a small smile and told her it was a deal, promising to do his best as long as she did her best too. He patted her head, leaving her feeling determined, but the moment was ruined when Dylan popped up again. The weasel tried to invite her for a glass of juice, but the mini fridge did not even hesitate, slamming her wooden tray into the back of his head with a satisfying thud. After Kanna put that weasel Dylan in his place with a tray to the skull, the hardened veteran headed out to stock up on supplies, only to find himself at a pharmacy run by a bald fraud who clearly did not know who he was talking to. The priest, a petty bastard named Ketchup, was resting his head on his hand and trying to flex his low-quality potions for 90 silvers each, telling the captain to get lost and stop wasting his time if he was not going to buy anything. Aaron just cracked his knuckles with a demonic grin that made his scars twitch, wondering aloud if it would be all right for fellow officials of the church to beat each other up. A younger, bald priest named Ains suddenly jumped in to save the day, asking why the regular price was being given to an honorary conventual. Ains leaned in and whispered that Priest Blean and the Inquisitor had personally requested this man at the church and appointed him themselves. Katoop's attitude flipped faster than a pancake, and he suddenly claimed the 90 silvers was a joke, offering the potions for 50 silvers instead. The unit leader burst out laughing, wondering if he had stumbled into some kind of holy cartel while he pocketed the cheap goods. As they walked through the halls, Ains explained that the authority was something the captain was entitled to, and he asked for understanding regarding Priest Katoop's sour attitude. He mentioned that everyone was stressed out because the abbot was visiting the fortress soon, which felt to the veteran like a division commander inspection from his old days. Ains bowed and wished him a safe trip home, and the hardened veteran thought the kid was the only sensible person in the whole building. He reflected on how he thought only humans like the corrupt Blean lived there, but his internal monologue was cut short when he spotted the Inquisitor. The woman was sitting on a bench in full armor, aggressively devouring a massive slice of cake like a total glutton with a no common sense look on her face. The weary captain wondered what the hell she was still doing there instead of returning to the capital, but she just stared him down with crumbs on her face before standing up. She marched over to him and shoved a piece of the sweet treat directly into his mouth, making him realize that the woman was really not normal, even if the cake was actually pretty sweet. The scene shifted to the fortress headquarters where the peace officer was throwing a total temper tantrum, screaming at the guards and calling them fools for letting prisoners escape. A female guard suggested replacing the wooden shackles with iron ones, but the fat commander turned red, roaring that one iron shackle cost as much as 50 wooden ones. The guards started trash-talking their boss, calling the fat man a demon pig, while the unit leader stood in the back noting that the guy's plump cheeks looked extremely hittable. Sir Ben mentioned that the Fenner family's eldest son, a night school dropout who never actually made the cut, was visiting soon, and the captain realized the headache was only going to get worse. But the real danger was waiting for him in the archives, where the orange-haired Nova was waiting to give him a sarcastic tutorial on how to use a door. She sparkled with mock kindness, explaining that handles exist so you do not have to smash through walls every time you enter a space, and she screamed at him for the sheer number of walls he had broken lately. The hardened veteran tried to claim he only broke those walls to save the kids, but Nova was not buying the excuses and told him the repair fees would be taken directly from his bounty rewards. Aaron flipped a silver coin onto the table as a tip, telling her to buy some beer and delicious food so she would not catch a bone disease from staying in her room too long. Nova exploded in anger, screaming that she was going to die of rage instead of disease and ordering him to get out of her sight. The captain smirked as he left, noting he at least did not break the door on the way out this time. During his next patrol with Kale, the rogue captain noticed that commoners were literally running away and screaming that they would be eaten if he caught them. He wondered if people thought he was an orc or something, but a sudden scream about stolen silverware caught his attention. He and Kale found a woman accusing 3 sketchy suspects of stealing her family heirlooms that had been passed down for generations. The first suspect, a guy with a literal goblin physique, claimed he was just sleeping and did not even eat dinner, which the hardened veteran found suspicious since meticulously eating 3 meals a day was the meaning of life in this age. The second suspect, a woman with crooked teeth, refused to talk about her personal business and bragged about having a silver mirror at home. The captain noted that a luxury item like a silver mirror did not suit a commoner, making her look like a total fraud. The third guy was a pale outsider, and when the victim pointed him out, the veteran decided he had no choice but to use his last resort. He ordered all of them to lead him back to their houses so he could dig around and find the truth. He took on the job out of pure boredom, but as the shadows stretched behind the suspects, he had no idea that this little investigation would lead to a terrifying result. Our hero wasn't in the mood for games, barking at the trio that they weren't exactly asking for permission, and he made sure they knew the guards weren't just being nice. They were being pushed to their limit. Aaron stared them down, questioning if they had some kind of death wish, like a holy scripture written backward or a massive red flag hanging in their living room. The suspects were visibly trembling, clearly realizing they were in deep trouble, as the weary captain shoved them forward and demanded they lead the way. He watched them with a sharp, calculating gaze, realizing that all three of them were hiding something big. Boredom was the enemy, and our protagonist found the timing of this investigation absolutely perfect. He smirked, clearly excited for the chaos to come. He spotted a silver mirror and couldn't help but call it out, leading the woman to snap back that the mirror was worth way more than the stolen silverware and definitely proved she wasn't the culprit. Aaron didn't buy the act for a second, silently noting how empty her home was and how suspicious it was that the mirror was the only item of value. He looked around, concluding the silverware wasn't here, but his eyes landed on something else entirely, a stash of men's underwear. Dylan immediately caught a whiff of the room, questioning the weird smell, and our guy pointed out that for a woman living alone, the place smelled suspiciously like a middle-aged man. The realization hit him like a brick. She was committing adultery, and he sarcastically noted that it was basically a felony, though the woman quickly tried to bribe him with a massive cake. Aaron didn't care about her love life, munching on the cake with a casual, savage energy as he signaled to move on to the next suspect. They arrived at a library filled to the brim with books, and the unit leader noted that the guy was well-read, though he immediately debunked that idea by finding a cheesy romance novel. Aaron started digging through the shelves and spotted a glimmering bracelet hidden between the pages. He thought it looked decent, figured it matched his current fit, and debated just swiping it because the owner probably wouldn't notice. Suddenly, he heard a weird noise, and when Kanna asked about it, our hero played it off as a sore shoulder, even though his demon eye was clearly throwing a tantrum. He barked at the parasite to keep it together before it got them caught, then turned to the suspect, acting like a casual shopper as he checked out the bracelet. The guy looked absolutely terrified, even though he tried to act chill, while Aaron just decided he liked the item and took it. Back on the street, the weary captain and his recruit moved on to the final suspect, a guy with a creepy, glowing presence. Aaron promised a thorough search and kicked the door down, only to find the guy had a bizarre, full-blown horse obsession, complete with a horse wearing a pink dress in his house. The guy tried to offer them hay stew, but he was promptly kicked into the dirt for his troubles. Meanwhile, an old woman finally stumbled upon the stolen silverware in a haystack, and the mission wrapped up with the team heading back, though our protagonist was still feeling the sting of a wasted day. Back at the inn, he grabbed a drink, and Kanna showed off her latest accomplishment: ice cubes shaped like flowers in his beer. Aaron felt a bit conflicted, knowing it was a waste of effort, but he kept his cool to protect her feelings. He reached out to give her the stolen bracelet, and the girl's face absolutely lit up. The mystery mage who owned the house, however, was currently losing his mind, shivering as if he'd caught a cold and fuming about the primitive barbarians in the fortress who dared to touch his precious, magic-infused jewelry. He watched in horror as Aaron walked away, his pride shattered by a mere guard who ignored his powerful magic. But the game was just beginning, as a mysterious woman revealed her true mission in the final shadows. She was hunting for the one who is truly loved by Mana. The scene shifted to the fortress gates where a subordinate noticed something weird, questioning the captain about why the Fenner family soldiers were keeping such a massive distance from them. Aaron smirked, suggesting maybe they just got beat into a pulp by a guard while picking fights at a tavern, but the subordinate didn't seem to buy that the elite soldiers were that pathetic. Suddenly, the ground started shaking as a carriage thundered toward them. The unit leader identified it as the carriage belonging to the Fenner family nobles, specifically the eldest son Philip had mentioned earlier. He barked at Brig to lower his head because a noble was passing by, and a gray-haired Nepo baby with a smug expression stared down at them as the carriage thundered past. The hardened veteran noted that the nobles had zero manners, not even slowing down for an inspection. Just as that high-clout ride disappeared, another carriage approached, and Aaron stepped out to intercept it. A cute blonde guy named Shone hopped out, identifying himself as a third-level administrator from Karzan who was here to collect some bounty rewards. Captain Aaron felt some serious city guy vibes coming off him and told him to head into the inner fortress. Shone thanked him with a polite bow and headed out, leaving the guards to deal with the next wave of traffic. Brig commented on the high number of carriages today, admitting he felt uncomfortable around high-ranking people, but the weary captain warned him to watch his mouth or he would jinx them. Right on cue, a church carriage arrived, and a priest stepped out, asking if he was looking at the honorary conventual Aaron. Our protagonist gave a half-hearted salute, but the priest reached out and physically corrected him, telling him he needed to raise his right elbow higher. The priest smiled, noting that Aaron's faith was apparently as strong as the reports claimed and suggesting they should have a deeper conversation next time. As the church ride clattered away, Brigg noted that with the church and the Fenner family both in town, things were about to get stupidly busy, and the rogue captain could only agree. Brigg muttered that with the church sitting on top of the Fenner family, things were about to get insane. Captain Aaron stared at the sky and simply agreed. It sure looked that way. Suddenly, Nova came charging in. The rogue captain asked what that redhead was doing out of the orchard after so long. She looked furious, demanded he bring out the items he was keeping, and Aaron lugged over a massive, blood-soaked bag and dropped it with a heavy thud. He asked if she meant the heads of the Karzan fixer and the other two guys. Shone took one look at the bag and started gagging, confirming through his nausea that those were indeed the bounty rewards. The hardened veteran mocked him, saying he had a real talent for talking while gagging. Shone admitted he had a weak stomach and told them they could just leave the bag. He was only running an errand. He added it was a huge relief the guy was caught. That bastard was the notorious wolf ghost from an organization that had been a massive headache back in Karzan City. The captain realized this was the one looking for Kanna and wondered if more fixers would show up later. Once the work was done, Shone perked up and asked where the best restaurant in the fortress was. His hobby was exploring food. The weary captain thought about that gross fish bread for a second but quickly waved the idea away and recommended Hessen Bakery in District 3. He asked if Shone wanted to go together since it was close. Shone happily agreed, though he checked if the unit leader was technically working right now. They arrived at the shop where a buff, bald baker proudly presented their signature cheesecake. He bragged that even his wife, a former beauty of the fortress, loved it, and told them to stop talking and just eat. Shone took a bite and was impressed. He admitted he'd been worried on the way because Karzan was in total chaos lately. Because of the lone wolf, the city was a mess, and their movements were getting more aggressive. He laid out the three major powers, the lone wolf, the frosty dagger, and the cute rabbit. The captain chewed on his cake, thinking even thugs lived complicated lives. Our hero asked who led the lone wolf. Shone got serious. The guy was named Philip, a bastard son of a noble family likely banished for trying to poison the eldest son. The scariest thing about him was his insane possessiveness. Shone told the story of how Frosty Dagger members once took a cheap decorative sword from one of Philip's taverns as a joke. Philip didn't care about the value. He just hated that they took something that belonged to him. That night, he hunted them down and took the sword back from their dead bodies. He was a wolf who never let go once he bit down. The captain realized Philip probably saw his mini-fridge Kanna as a possession. He smirked, thinking Philip didn't know he could die from having his teeth ripped out if he bit the wrong thing. Our protagonist decided he needed to visit Karzan soon. Maybe a 3-day business trip would do. Meanwhile, Nova was loading a carriage with oranges for export. Aaron walked up and asked to tag along now that things were moving. Nova was surprised and asked what wind blew him in all of a sudden. He claimed he had business in Karzan. Nova told him to go ahead, as long as he had the outer fortress guard commander's permission. The rogue captain lied smoothly with an "oh-ho," saying he definitely had it. Another guard questioned if Nova was really taking Captain Aaron, noting the inner fortress guards were already planning to accompany them. Nova explained that if the guards left their posts, they'd have to hand them over to the Fenner family, so it was more efficient to just take Aaron. The guard complained it was too arbitrary for him to show up right before departure, but Nova just said that was why everyone called him Scoundrel Aaron. She thought about how the captain had solved every problem lately and figured his promotion was just a matter of time, or maybe even higher. Aaron overheard and told her he didn't need any of that. For a scoundrel like him, being guard captain was perfect. Nova realized that if she tried to force him, he'd probably just drift away. She decided there was no need to dig too deep as long as Scoundrel Aaron stayed in the fortress for a long time. Finally, they set off. The carriage rumbled toward the gate. The hardened veteran looked at Nova and trash-talked her outfit, asking why she was wearing a dress instead of a shirt and if she was dressing up for the city. Nova told him to shut up, though her face showed she felt strangely uneasy about the path ahead. As the carriage rumbled through the gates of the capital, Shone perked up with a bright smile and offered a delicious cake to Miss Orange. Nova was buried under a mountain of paperwork and citrus documents. She snapped that she was a little busy right now and suggested that if he needed someone to play with, he should bother the guy sitting next to him instead. Shone looked worriedly at the guard captain and asked if he did something wrong. He only used the nickname because he wanted to get closer to her. The rogue captain leaned in with a devious smirk and started trolling the poor administrator, claiming oranges aren't all the same and that he was pronouncing it wrong. Our protagonist insisted it wasn't just orange, but orange, putting weird emphasis on the syllables. Shone fell for it immediately and tried offering the cake again with the new pronunciation, while Nova stared out the window in silent fury. They finally reached Karzan City. Nova told them she'd be in the council handling work, so she didn't need an escort. She told the guys to go touring but warned them to meet back in front of the tavern by tomorrow afternoon. She pointed straight at the unit leader and demanded he not cause trouble, specifically, use the door if he went anywhere. The weary captain joked that the method of opening a door didn't change just because it was the city, but Nova yelled that he went around smashing them in Kaseritic too. Our guy just laughed and said he'd see her tomorrow before asking his friend Shoba, who was actually named Shone, for a city guide. Shone enthusiastically suggested the best restaurant in Karzan, the pig that was choked to death, raving about their masterpiece four-leg meat. The hardened veteran grinned and said he'd visit the restaurants next time, because tonight he was going to go kill the leader of the lone wolf. Shone stood there dazed for a second before letting out a massive scream, only to immediately calm down and assume it was another joke. He laughed and asked if Aaron thought he'd be fooled a second time after the arranged stunt, telling the unit leader to do as he wished. Shone figured it worked out well for him since he didn't want to see that guy around anyway, but he was impressed by how casual the guard captain was being. The rogue captain noted their opinions matched and suggested they go see the cute rabbit guys first. Shone corrected him that it was the cute rabbit, but decided to play along with the joke to see how far the weary captain would go. However, the administrator realized that unlike its name, the cute rabbit was a guild that used quite a bit of force. Shone thought the joke was going too far and planned to intercede as a third-level administrator, but the moment they stepped into the tavern, the smell of sweat and alcohol hit him like a truck. Shone turned purple and ran back outside, gagging that the smell was horrendous. The thugs inside were instantly triggered, asking if those bastards were trying to pick a fight by insulting their scent. Next, the duo headed to the Tavern of Drunken Widows, a place the Frosty Dagger painstakingly cared for and most Karzan citizens avoided. Shone tried to stop himself from entering this time, but the ladies at the door recognized him and dragged the administrator inside as a VIP. By the time they left, the moon was high and the preparations were finally finished. A drunk and dizzy Shone stumbled behind the rogue captain, wondering just how long he planned on joking around. The captain called him Shoneby and told him to lead the way to the Lucky Gambler, the casino run by the lone wolf. Shone panicked, warning him that the casino was even more dangerous than the taverns they just visited. The human cleaner just gave a dark look and said that was all the more reason to go. Our guy decided that in order to catch the boss who could be anywhere, he had to smash down all the doghouses first. Shone stared at him in total shock as he finally realized the plan to kill Philip, the demon of Karzan, wasn't a joke at all. Aaron told him to stop the nonsense and lead the way because they were tight on time if they wanted to finish by tomorrow. Meanwhile, a massive fire erupted in the city, lighting up the night sky. Jern, the gatekeeper of the Lone Wolf, was fuming about a hunk of a bastard who committed fraud in their casino. Another member ran up shouting that someone set a building on fire and started a fight with the Frosty Dagger. Jern realized the city was in total havoc, but he stood his ground because he was the Lone Wolf's gatekeeper. A hooded figure walked up and casually asked if he was having a good evening and working hard. Jern wondered if the newcomer was just a drunkard, but the unit leader noted that the gatekeeper hadn't moved an inch despite the chaos. Jern claimed guarding the spot was his duty, so the rogue captain started trash-talking the boss of the Lone Wolf, calling him a coward scared of dying. Jern warned him to watch his words, claiming Philip was a cruel man with a magic weapon that burnt opponents to a crisp. The most terrifying part was the knight protecting him, though he admitted the guy was a drunkard with a ruined right hand. Jern still believed the Sword of Humanity was the Sword of Humanity and noted that Philip had 40 organization members at his beck and call. The hardened veteran thanked Jern for the info, feeling like he was looking at his old self. He told the gatekeeper that if Philip happened to die, he should quit this job and find something he was actually good at. Jern was left speechless as the captain just walked past and entered the base. Inside, our hero noted that there were supposed to be 40 members, but with the chaos outside, there were only about 35 left. He revealed his master plan. He had paid gold to the cute rabbit and Frosty Dagger to cause havoc and sweep up the organization's members. He had even tossed Shone into an inn once the guidance was done. Now, all that was left was the man at the end of the hall. A red-haired knight sat among a pile of empty bottles, taking a long drink before asking what the intruder wanted. The captain smiled, knowing he wouldn't be passing through easily and deciding he just needed to fight well. The red-haired knight sat amidst a graveyard of empty bottles, taking a long swig while the rogue captain watched from the shadows. The human cleaner noted the guy looked like a total disabled bum just like the rumors said, but he guessed the fraud could at least raise an alcohol bottle. Captain Aaron knew that compared to this drunkard, he had a body trained every single day, but even so, his mercenary instincts warned him that victory wasn't guaranteed against the power of aura. The moment the fight started, the hallway exploded in a blur of motion as the knight lunged forward with insane speed. Our protagonist realized the guy's movements were on a completely different level, possessing a destructive power that felt like a natural disaster. The unit leader knew that unlike an ordinary sword, clashing against an aura-infused blade would usually result in his own weapon shattering. Most knights normally tried to break their opponent's weapon first to end the fight instantly. But as the knight swung his blade with full strength, the weary captain did the unthinkable and blocked the path of the sword forcibly with nothing but his raw strength. The drunkard looked absolutely stunned, and our hero noted that their strengths were currently on par, making the odds of victory a 50-50 coin toss. The hardened veteran knew that what would divide their victory or loss was just a minor gap in skill. In a flash of steel and blood, the hallway was painted red as the unit leader landed a lethal strike that sent the knight crashing to the floor. The rogue captain took a breath, noticing his own blade was chipped now from the impact. He picked up the knight's superior weapon, thinking what a nice sword it was and deciding to pocket it for himself. Our guy flashed a wicked grin, telling the corpse he would pray for its peace in return, noting that even if he looked like a villain, he was still an honorary conventual. Meanwhile, back at the inn, Nova woke up to the sound of explosions and grumbled about how noisy the city was. She stumbled to the window, wondering if cities were usually this chaotic and complaining that she couldn't sleep. She threw open the shutters and saw half the district was on fire with thugs fighting in the streets, making her wonder what kind of mess this was. Suddenly, the hardened veteran's face popped into her head, but she quickly dismissed it, thinking there was no way the weary captain would do something this insane. At the Lone Wolf base, Captain Aaron stood before a set of massive, glowing golden doors and noted that thug bastards liking gold was a universal truth. He delivered a heavy kick that slammed the doors open, revealing a room decorated like a fancy noble's suite. 3 massive thugs immediately confronted him, demanding to know who he was and how he dared to step foot inside. The leader of the group bragged that since he caught the eyes of the 4 heavenly kings, he wasn't leaving in one piece. The human cleaner just puckered his lips and let out a laugh, trash-talking them by calling them the 3 Piglet brothers instead. He mocked the guy in the back for being so cringed out that he was standing all the way over there, while the thugs demanded to know how he even got into the room. A man with teal hair sitting on a throne realized Knight Bahashan should have been guarding the corridors. The hardened veteran casually leaned on his new sword and claimed he didn't see anyone who looked like a knight. The thugs realized with a cold sweat that the sword in the unit leader's hand belonged to Bahashan. The boss, Philip, laughed it off, saying the knight was just a pretty penny he brought in and asked what business the captain had. The rogue captain didn't mince words, flashing a grin and stating he just came to kill him. Philip burst into a fit of laughter, calling it hilarious before asking if the human cleaner really had the confidence to pull it off. He started flexing his clout, naming Count Bahart, the first-level administrator, and the mayor as his backers. Philip claimed he was just a step away from having connections in the imperial family and asked if the weary captain could handle that kind of heat. He offered to forget the offense if the hardened veteran kissed his feet, but the unit leader didn't even let him finish the sentence. In one clean movement, the weary captain stepped into range and sliced Philip's head clean off, shocking the thugs into silence. Captain Aaron stood over the body and noted that unfortunately, he was already wanted by an even worse guy anyway. He looked at the magic weapon on the table and realized it was the one Jern talked about. The rogue captain casually sat on the boss's throne and used the magic wand to light a stick, telling the 3 piglets he was now holding interviews for the new boss position of the Lone Wolf. He invited everyone to show off their merits, and the thugs didn't even flinch at their former leader's death before trying to sell themselves out. One guy bragged his nickname was the Human Grinder Knife and claimed he destroyed over 100 heads. Another yelled that he could kidnap anyone without leaving a single trace of evidence. But suddenly, a blur of blue energy slashed through the room, and the thugs were cut down in an instant. Dante, the top-tier knight who had been watching from the back, stood over the bodies with a bloody blade. He introduced himself and told the hardened veteran that he had been in charge of the actual work for the Lone Wolf, asking him to entrust the position of boss to him instead. The bloody chaos of the night finally settled, but the morning after brought a whole new set of headaches for the city officials. At the council headquarters, a group of administrators discussed how the three major organizations had an all-out war yesterday. While the exact number of casualties hadn't been tallied yet, there were thankfully no civilian deaths. Suddenly, the door creaked open and Shone came bursting in, panting and apologizing profusely for being late because he overslept. The lead administrator looked at him with heavy eyes and asked who he might be. The poor guy introduced himself as the third-level administrator. The boss told him there was no need to be apologetic, especially since he brought so many presents in that massive box he was lugging around. Shone awkwardly laughed, explaining that the box wasn't for everyone, but was actually a gift he received from a friend on the way there. He apologized again, saying he only brought it because he was in such a rush. A snide noble named Fuhr started trash-talking him immediately, calling Shone slow at catching on to things and telling him to just take a seat already. Fuhr continued the meeting, noting that unlike the other two organizations, they hadn't been able to get in touch with the lone wolf and needed to find Philip as soon as possible. As Shone tried to sit down, Fuhr kept up the verbal abuse, calling him an amazing commoner and telling him he had some nerve being late with his background. The Nepo baby asked if there was even anything good inside that box, suggesting Shone should have offered it to the concierge instead of being so stupid. Fuhr even told him to start looking for a job that suited him better. But Shone finally reached his breaking point. Maybe it was the effect of hanging out with the rogue captain yesterday, but Shone screamed at Fuhr to shut up. He yelled that this was a gift from a friend and told the noble to stop blabbering nonsense just because he had an open mouth. Shone slammed the box down on the table, shocking everyone in the room. The lead administrator asked what they were doing and where they thought they were fighting, but the moment the box opened, the room went dead silent. Shone remembered telling the unit leader that he would never get a promotion unless he brought back Philip's head, and that was exactly what rolled out onto the table. Everyone let out a horrified scream as they realized the boss of the lone wolf was officially retired. Back in the flashback, the captain told the new boss Dante to wrap the head up nicely because it was going to be a gift. Dante asked what would happen to the lone wolf now, but the weary captain told him to just figure it out and do well on his own. Our guy noted that now that there was no bastard left to bother his mini fridge canna, his business was done. He ordered Dante to watch Shone's back and let the gatekeeper Jern do whatever he wanted. The hardened veteran told the new boss to do his best and warned him not to make him come back all the way here again because it was too bothersome. Dante sweat nervously and promised to periodically send reports and even some gold coins along with them. The unit leader let out an oh-ho, asking if that would really be alright, clearly loving the idea of a passive income stream. Later, our protagonist found a mage who specialized in cleaning magic and stood still while a blast of blue energy washed over him. The demon eye on his collarbone grumbled about the impertinent little mage, but the human cleaner found the magic refreshing. He told the mage that cleaning magic was greater than he thought and felt even better than a bath. The mage sheepishly asked for 20 silver coins, and the captain asked if he ever went on business trips. Our hero offered gold coins if the mage would come to Kaseridik to teach a few spells to a girl he was raising. The mage was so hyped for the gold that he promised to move his entire residence to the fortress. The weary captain realized the guy's business must be seriously failing if he was that desperate. As he walked away, the mage chased him down to offer a free boot shine on the house. The hardened veteran noted the place had some great service and told the guy to find him at the fortress once he was ready. Meanwhile, Nova was sighing about the city being a mess and complained that it had to be like this the day she visited. She found the carriage and asked if the captain was waiting, but she stopped dead when she saw him. The rogue captain was fast asleep, looking surprisingly peaceful for a guy who just decapitated a crime lord. Nova realized he made a very different expression when he was asleep and let him rest. They ended up spending one more night in the city, and the next morning, our guy thanked the considerate Miss Orange for letting him sleep. She told him to shut up, claiming she only stayed because she had work to finish. She asked if the weary captain caused any trouble during his all-nighter, and he proudly claimed he didn't smash any walls. Nova asked if he did anything else, but then told him to be quiet because she didn't want to become an accomplice to his crimes. The hardened veteran casually mentioned he did pick a fight at the Lone Wolf headquarters, making Nova look at him with pure dread. She noticed a pile of colorful shields and breastplates in the carriage and asked what all that armor was. The unit leader laughed, calling them excellent souvenirs and claiming iron was the only thing with real value in this age. Nova was baffled by his standards for souvenirs, but our guy handed her a small heart guard and told her she should at least wear that. She complained that it looked a little small, but the rogue captain insisted it was more than enough for her. He trash-talked her by saying the chest area looked like it would get stuck, and told her she had a habit of overestimating herself. Nova screamed at him as the carriage rumbled into the forest, but their bickering was cut short when a stone arrow whistled through the air and slammed into the wood. Our hero realized it was an attack and noted that only one kind of trash used stone arrows that even mercenaries wouldn't touch. Goblins began emerging from the trees, and the captain realized there were roughly 20 of them. He found it weird that 20 goblins would group together like that, as if a whole village had formed nearby. He told Nova to get back inside and drew his sword, deciding to play with the green bastards for a bit. The hardened veteran went on a rampage, slicing through the monsters with ease. However, he noticed something was off because regular goblins would have run away after 6 of them died, but these guys were getting even more aggressive. After the last one fell, Nova asked if he was finished, and the weary captain confirmed it but noted that these guys seemed like they were being controlled. He pointed out a black substance on the blade, identifying it as remnants of black magic. He realized someone was controlling living goblins, which was on a completely different level from controlling corpses. The captain wondered why a powerful mage would come to such a remote place, but then he remembered Kasuridik already had a record of a black mage breaking in. Nova gasped, wondering if they were targeting Kana again. The unit leader told her they would find out once they got back, sighing that he really hated bothersome work. The fortress had been unusually quiet lately, and some of the guards wondered if it was because the hardened veteran finally went off to Karzan. One of them joked that no wonder things were so peaceful, though another pointed out that fewer carriages were showing up because of frequent monster attacks on the road. They were just enjoying how easy the inspections had become when the sound of galloping hooves broke the silence. A lone rider approached the gate, and the guards realized it was the unit leader himself returning from his trip. Captain Aaron rode in looking like a total boss and told everyone they were doing a good job as he dismounted from his horse. One of the guards asked why he didn't return by carriage like he left, but the weary captain explained there were way too many monsters on the road, so he had to get out and do a bit of cleaning. The hardened veteran casually tossed a grotesque, blurred-out object toward the lead guard, who caught it with a look of pure horror. The guard stuttered, asking what that disgusting thing was, and our hero explained it was a special goblin part known to boost stamina. He noted it was a rare find in the market and offered to sell it for a discount, asking for 60 copper coins instead of 70 since they were freshly picked. In the background, Miss Orange was absolutely losing her mind, screaming at the top of her lungs that she wanted to go back and take a shower already. She roared at the unit leader to stop talking about those gross parts and just move, which prompted the captain to quickly apologize and toss the bag to the guard before heading out. The guard was stoked on the deal, but the weary captain just grinned as he officially declared his return to Kasuridik Fortress. Later at the inn, the boys of Unit 4 were having a full-blown celebration, and Dylan was practically crying tears of joy over his new gear. The red-haired weasel called the hardened veteran his brother, sobbing that he never even received a gift this good from his own father. The captain felt pretty smug, thinking that as he expected, high-tier armor was the ultimate gift for a mercenary. Vermin asked how a massive incident happened in Karzan at the exact same time our hero was visiting, and the unit leader played it off as a total coincidence, though the veteran guard wasn't buying it for a second. Henna walked over with some beers and told everyone to make some room, looking a bit stressed. Captain Aaron asked how business was going, and the sharp-tongued landlady snapped that they couldn't make sales because they were all out of ingredients. She explained that carriages weren't coming in and the local lord was seizing rations under the excuse of cleaning preparations. Henna went on a rant, calling the lord a total bitch, which made the hardened veteran warn her she was being way too loud. She didn't care and asked if he was scared, pointing out that he even talked trash about the emperor. The unit leader asked if she was already drunk, while Dylan and the others decided it was best to just avoid her when she was in that mood. To calm her down, the rogue captain pointed out her new headband and told her it suited her perfectly. Henna blushed and bragged that Aaron brought it back as a gift, her anger instantly evaporating into a happy giggle. Vermin pulled the captain aside and mentioned that the church came looking for him while he was gone. He warned that the new abbot from the capital looked like a guy who was very hard to please. Vermin also dropped some intel about a new force of brand new faces gathering in District 6, which was the territory of Scar and his father Jackson. The hardened veteran wondered who dared to gather in that area and decided he needed to go have a look around District 6 immediately. He called for Vermin to join him, and the duo headed out into the slums. As they walked through the streets, our guy complained about the smell and asked if people were still using the sidewalks as a bathroom. Vermin noted the smell had actually decreased lately thanks to the captain's reputation, as everyone now considered keeping their own heads more precious than being lazy. They spotted a group of strangers in an alley, and a man named George stepped forward to greet them. George noticed they were working hard on patrol and asked if something was the matter. The hardened veteran stared him down, noting he had never seen George's face before and asking for his name. George introduced himself and the unit leader asked what his business was in Kaseritic with his ugly-looking friends. The newcomer gave a sob story about how the fortress was his deceased mother's hometown and he wanted to start a new job in a secluded area. The captain found his smug attitude annoying and realized that if the guy was acting rudely, it would be easier to just beat the truth out of him. Instead, the unit leader barked an order for them to strip everything off right now. He claimed there was no better way to find out if they were related to demons than checking for the handprint. The thugs stripped, and while they didn't have the demon mark, they were covered in all sorts of other tattoos. Our hero noted they definitely weren't working normal jobs before, but George just laughed it off, asking if that wasn't just how life goes. George handed over a pretty silver penny as a bribe, and the rogue captain watched them walk away, knowing for a fact they were former thugs but realizing he had no legal excuse to stop them yet. He left for the synagogue and was immediately ambushed by a high-ranking priest who was screaming his lungs out. The priest begged the honorary conventual to do him a favor and kill a guy named Brighton. The hardened veteran thought the priest looked like the real thug and asked who this Brighton guy was. The priest explained that Brighton was the new abbot, a viscous and demonic bastard who was obsessed with holy work. The priest ranted about being sick of prayer recitals and morning prayers, and when our guy pointed out that those were literally a priest's job description, the crazy old man offered a massive retaining fee to just beat the abbot into a pulp. The unit leader wondered just how bad this abbot was to drive someone this crazy, but then he met the man himself. Abbot Brighton was a deadpan serious priest who immediately lectured the captain for not knowing the prayer recitals. He scolded the hardened veteran for being too busy to memorize scripture, bragging that he stayed up all night with his eyes wide open to study the word. Brighton lectured our hero for 3 straight hours, and the captain stood there sweating, wondering if he had to attend this boring lecture every single day. The abbot then decided to join the unit leader on patrol, and the captain thought about how much the reward was for beating this guy up. He watched Brighton carefully, planning to punch him the second he showed a two-faced side. But as they walked through the city, the abbot personally gave blessings to poor children and maintained a perfect, holy stance. The human cleaner was baffled because the guy didn't have a single loophole and was actually a genuinely great person. After a full day, the abbot praised the captain for having strong faith and recommended he read more scripture. Our hero realized he couldn't find a single excuse to hit a person like this just for a bribe. He decided to avoid the synagogue entirely for a while, but the next morning, Brighton was standing right outside his door. The abbot greeted him, saying it was the perfect morning for prayer. The weary captain was horrified that the guy found him from all the way across the city. Brighton told him that working sincerely was a practice of faith and promised to stay by his side during his training so he wouldn't miss his morning prayers. The hardened veteran screamed internally at the cluelessly great son of a priest, realizing his peaceful mornings were officially over. The weary captain had no time for morning prayers when the scent of monster blood was already thick in the air. The hallway erupted in a spray of gore as the hardened veteran sliced through an orc, coldly counting out 6. Another green-skinned monster lunged with a guttural growl, but the rogue captain didn't even blink, burying his blade deep and finishing the count at 7. He stood amidst the carnage, declaring the job done, but the victory tasted like ash. On the blood-soaked dirt lay Pra, a tenant farmer who had been caught in the crossfire. Dylan and the rest of the unit looked on with grim expressions, noting that Pra was a diligent and nice guy, making it a total shame he ended up as fodder. The weasel wondered if they should increase the patrols along the outer fortress since it was insane that orcs would appear this far out. Vermin sighed, mentioning that there had been a massive increase in monsters lately. Our protagonist felt a surge of rage, trash-talking the noble bastards who cared more about farming profits than the lives of the people. Dylan reported that they had finished cleaning up the bodies, but the unit leader stayed silent, staring at his hand which was stained with a familiar, pulsing black magic residue. The hardened veteran looked at Pra's body one last time, whispering a goodbye and noting that this cleanup should be enough to cover the beer Pra had paid for last time. Suddenly, the captain looked up and spotted the Inquisitor casually chilling in a tree, realization hitting him that this fortress was nothing but a magnet for crazy people. He noted there were traces of dark magic on the orc corpses this time too, and realized this wasn't something that could be kicked under the rug. The only person he could talk to about this was the one man who took rules more seriously than life itself. He headed to the church and found Abbot Brighton absolutely losing his mind on another priest, screaming about how the guy didn't know the import and export numbers. The abbot called the man's excuses trash and mocked his messy accounting, yelling that the person in charge of the Blood of God potion shouldn't be such a total joke. Our guy actually looked a bit impressed by the intensity, noting that the priest being bullied was the same fraud who was illegally selling potions before. Brighton kicked the man out, telling him to go sweep the yard, and then immediately turned his laser focus on the captain. The abbot didn't even say hello before asking if he had read the Holy Scripture yet, reminding him that being busy was just a pathetic excuse. The unit leader ignored the lecture, stating he had something urgent to tell him. He revealed that the tenant farmers were attacked by monsters today, and more importantly, traces of a dark mage were found on the scene. Brighton's deadpan expression finally shifted into something serious as he asked what happened to the farmers. When the weary captain told him that 4 people had died, a dark shadow crossed the abbot's face. He thanked our hero for the info and asked him to look over the place for a while because he had somewhere he needed to go. As the abbot marched off, the inquisitor popped out from behind a pillar, looking relieved that she had finally stopped hiding from the scary priest. The abbot didn't waste any time, heading straight for the Lord's manor to force a change in the current situation. He single-handedly prohibited the movement of tenant farmers until the cleanup was complete and forced the Lord to hold a funeral of an unprecedented scale. The rogue captain watched the massive ceremony, thinking that the abbot was a truly strange man for caring this much about common farmers. He asked Vermin when the cleanup was supposed to start, referring to the noble as the illegitimate child squared. Dylan, looking uneducated as always, snapped at the comment but revealed the mission was pulled ahead from 3 days to tomorrow. The captain asked if Nova was coming along, but Vermin said it was only the Fenner family and the inner fortress garrison, while the outer fortress guys were just milking the job at home. The hardened veteran realized it was lucky that Nova stayed inside the fortress, but his mercenary instincts started tingling. He suspected that if a dark mage was really behind this, the monsters were just bait meant to disperse the troops guarding the fortress. He figured the abbot and Nova could handle the cleanup, but he couldn't shake the feeling that leaving the lady alone in an empty castle was a massive red flag. As a result, the next morning was filled with the sound of war horns as the knights rode out to hunt monsters. While the inner fortress had a knight protecting the lady, the outer defense was left to the captain and the inquisitor. Abbot Brighton decided to use the patrol time to read Holy Scripture aloud for the unit leader, which made the demon eye on his collarbone scream in pure agony. But while the heroes were distracted by holy lectures, things got even crazier under the cover of night. A red-haired woman stood on a cliff overlooking the fortress, asking for a progress report. A hooded follower confirmed that the Crimson Darkness and Harton had already entered the fortress. The woman let out a sinister smile, noting it was worth baiting them with the goblins and orcs. She revealed her true goal. Once her master consumed the heart of Kana, the one beloved by Mana, they wouldn't have to hide from the hypocrites anymore. She vowed not to fail like the fraud Corentel, declaring that everything was going according to her plan. The follower asked why she made it sound so easy to open the fortress gates, and the woman just snapped her fingers. Suddenly, a massive, disgusting mutant known as the Entangled One burst from the ground, its multiple heads groaning in hunger. She mentioned they couldn't open the gates with mediocre power and asked for the Night Hunter. The follower awkwardly mentioned that the Night Hunter was going to be a little late because he got lost again. The woman turned into a total hater, screaming about that damned demon's pedestal of a bastard and how he was always causing trouble by being late. She decided to go first anyway, ordering her people to bring out the corpses they brought to plant terror within the inner fortress. The mutant monster lunged toward the gate, ready to smash everything in its path, but a sudden flash of dark energy struck it from above. The monster shrieked as its flesh was torn apart by a massive impact. The followers and the dark mage froze in shock, wondering what that was. Standing on the wall with glowing red eyes and a demonic aura was the hardened veteran himself. The rogue captain let out a jagged, terrifying smile, telling the demon bastards that he was actually wondering what he would do if they didn't show up. But just before the Kassaritic fortress was turned into a total war zone, things were actually kind of quiet. Some priest was busy reading from a holy book about the sun's warmth sticking around even after dark, trying to be all deep and philosophical. Our boy Aaron was sitting right there next to the Inquisitor, looking like he was dying of boredom from the sermon. The hardened veteran thought the whole thing was pure torture, literally begging for a demon to pop out and save him from the religious lecture. Suddenly, he spotted something moving in the moonlight, and sure enough, a massive, multi-headed purple freak of nature came charging over the walls. The beast let out a gut-wrenching roar that would make most people wet themselves, but the weary captain just flashed a predatory grin, calling the situation bad while looking like he just won the lottery. He started screaming that a demon had appeared, sounding way too excited for a guy about to fight a nightmare. He lunged forward, his blade carving through the purple meat as blood sprayed everywhere. The dark mage watching from the sidelines was losing his mind, wondering what the hell that monster was and if it was actually a knight since he didn't even see any aura coming off him. The red-haired villainess was equally shook, watching the rogue Captain Precision cut the beast's joints in the middle of a chaotic brawl. Eren didn't care about the hype, he just kept hacking away, joking that some generous dark mage must have drawn dotted lines on the monster to show him where to cut. He called the whole slaughter a top-tier stress reliever as he stood atop the heap of gore. Covered in blood and looking like a total psycho, the unit leader yelled for them to bring it on. That's when the Inquisitor joined the chat, swinging a massive holy blade that glowed with a divine light, slicing through the tough hide like it was warm butter. The captain gave her props, noting that holy power is low-key the best counter for these demonic frauds. More monsters started crawling out of the shadows, making the villainess snap. She screamed that they weren't even knights and decided to hell with the plan. She was going to murder everyone herself. The Inquisitor didn't miss a beat, her blade whistling through the air as she sent more heads flying. The villainess looked horrified as her forces got turned into mincemeat. The Inquisitor finished her combo with a glowing blue arc of destruction while Eren just casually wiped the blood off his face. One of the hooded mages tried to crawl away in terror, but the Inquisitor loomed over him with her blood-stained sword ready for the finishing blow. She paused, her golden eyes cold as ice, while the hardened veteran pointed out that these mages were great at brainwashing pets but total trash at actual combat. He told her they needed to hear the plan to figure out why these idiots were attacking, but she hit him back with the religious logic, saying that talking to a demon is a straight-up sin. Our hero argued it was a necessary step to save lives, which left her silent for a second. The mage tried to save himself, screaming that he wasn't a demon but a dark mage, begging them not to lump him in with the puppets. Eren didn't want to hear the technicalities and delivered a brutal kick to the guy's face, telling him to shut up and drop his name. The mage squealed that his name was Pepperoon, and the captain immediately dubbed him Perot Jackass. He demanded to know why demons kept jumping them and told the guy to explain the entire plot in just one panel. The terrified mage spilled the beans, revealing they were from a group called the Assembly. He claimed there was a rumor that eating the heart of the girl beloved by Mana would let a mage reach the apex of power. He laughed nervously, saying the plan had been moving for days and the inner fortress was probably already in total chaos. He begged for mercy, but the monster of the inn just delivered a crushing blow, silencing the trash talker for good. Eren stared off into the distance, realizing things were getting spicy at the inner fortress. We then see Knight Ben, the silver-haired Nepo baby, acting all confident and promising he wouldn't let his guard down like last time. He flexed that he was actually pretty strong for a knight and told everyone to trust him. The weary captain wasn't buying the hype, thinking the guy's confidence was basically zero and remembering how useless he was before. Still, he hoped Nova had the inner fortress locked down. Back in the present, Dylan the Weasel was screaming his lungs out for the Inquisitor and Eren to get down there. Eren looked annoyed, sarcastically saying he needed to say a prayer first, while the Inquisitor gave him a deadpan look. Dylan kept panicking, yelling that the inner fortress was in deep trouble. They started booking it toward the danger. Meanwhile, over at the rear gate, Dylan was yawning while pulling guard duty. A massive, bearded tank of a man appeared out of the dark, asking if this was Kasseritic Fortress. The other guard tried to act tough, telling the giant to identify himself, but Dylan could feel the insane pressure. Sensing the danger, Dylan did a complete 180 and started acting like a 5-star tour guide, welcoming the guy and yapping about the fresh air. He could feel the dangerous stench of death coming off the stranger and realized if they tried to stop him, they would be dead in seconds. He even thought this guy might be more of a monster than his own captain. The bearded giant asked if Dylan was a knight, and Dylan screamed a terrified, "Sir, no sir," like a recruit in boot camp. The giant just said, "I see," and walked right through the gates. Dylan collapsed the second the guy was gone, screaming for his captain as purple magic started swirling in the air. Inside the fortress, Knight Ben noticed black flames and wondered if the dark mages had finally crashed the party. He found a blonde lady on the floor and rushed over, asking if she was safe. The girl grabbed him, crying about how scared she was, and Ben tried to be the hero, telling her she was safe now and they should leave. But as he tried to lead her away, the girl suddenly went full demon mode, stabbing her claws right through him. Ben coughed up blood in total shock, staring at his lady who now had glowing red eyes and a face straight out of a horror movie. Knight Ben stood there clutching his chest as the blonde lady he just tried to save dropped the act, her face twisting into a mocking smirk. The girl transformed right before his eyes into a red-haired menace named Crimson Darkness, a member of the society. She laughed, trash-talking Ben by saying men are all the same and they always lose their heads the moment a beauty gets close. Ben looked absolutely pathetic, bleeding out and realizing he had fallen for the oldest trick in the book after promising he would never let his guard down. He could practically hear the weary captain's voice in his head, mocking him for losing yet again. But Ben wasn't ready to be a total fraud just yet. He gritted his teeth and flared his green aura, screaming that he absolutely wouldn't fall this time. He lunged at her, his blade whistling through the air, but the villainess was too fast, dodging his strike with a casual backflip. She was shocked that the guy was still moving with such deep wounds, calling him a total hypocrite for not staying down. Ben didn't care, thinking to himself that she wasn't even that strong and he could take her in one go if he wasn't already half dead. He pushed through the pain, swinging his sword with everything he had left. Crimson darkness cursed him as he closed the distance, his blade glowing with a blinding light as he prepared his final move. He roared that this was the end, letting off a massive explosion that shook the entire room. But when the smoke cleared, Ben was the one on the ground. A new player entered the game, a hooded guy named Harton who had blocked the attack and saved the girl's life. Ben stared up in horror, realizing there was another demon in the room. Harton didn't look impressed, telling his partner that this is exactly what happens when she tries to solo a knight. Crimson Darkness was fuming, screaming that she actually had him and was about to win. She wanted to tear Ben limb from limb, but Harton told her to shut up and stop wasting time. He warned her that if she kept acting out, the master would be furious. She let out an annoyed groan as Harton explained the plan. He wasn't saying she couldn't go wild, but escaping wouldn't be easy without the knight. He decided she would stay behind to cause a distraction while he slipped out to bring the girl loved by Mana back to their master. Meanwhile, the hardened veteran and the Inquisitor were sprinting through the quiet town. Aaron noted how weirdly calm it was but figured it was better than a total panic. Suddenly, his eyes widened as he spotted a massive figure in the distance. It was a giant of a man in a dark robe, and the rogue captain wondered if this was another dark mage ally joining the party. The bearded giant turned around, calling him a young man and asking if he could ask a question. He claimed he had lost his way and asked for directions to Kaseritic Fortress. Aaron stared at him, realizing the fortress was literally standing right there in plain sight. He almost laughed, thinking this guy's sense of direction was stupidly broken in the worst way possible. The human cleaner put on his best fake smile, acting like a total bro and telling the elder that it was only natural to get lost because the layout was so complex. He started yapping about how the former lord didn't want to live with commoners, so he built the fortress outside the city. Our hero pointed toward the main gate, telling the giant to turn left and keep going straight to find it. The giant was actually grateful, thanking the young man and saying he would have been in real trouble without the help. He asked if Aaron was a knight, but the unit leader just flexed his fraud energy, claiming he was just a lowly guard captain. The giant was relieved, saying a kind youth like him couldn't possibly be a knight, and bid him a good night before walking off in the wrong direction. The captain watched him go, laughing at the ignorant medieval fools and the power of his modern man wisdom. He was too busy to fight every single elite that showed up anyway. Just then, Dylan came sprinting up, screaming that there was a massive problem and a guy as big as him had just entered the fortress. Aaron just shrugged, saying he already handled it. Dylan's eyes turned into stars, calling him a legend, but the captain told him to get his head in the game because a dark mage was actually on the loose. They found Ben lying in a pile of his own blood, and Aaron looked down at the pathetic knight, noting that he really wasn't even human for surviving this much. He told Dylan to stay behind and keep an eye on the body while he went to handle the real mess. Dylan was hyped, thinking he caught a break by not having to fight. Aaron and the Inquisitor reached the inner fortress, which was a total disaster zone. They found another lady crying for help, claiming demons were chasing her and she barely managed to escape. But our boy didn't hesitate for a second, his blade flashing in a red arc as he slashed her across the chest. The girl was stunned, asking why he would do that, and the rogue captain just smirked, saying it was pure instinct. He told her that no matter how bad the situation was, it was too suspicious for a random lady to get that close to him. The villainess dropped the act, her eyes glowing red with rage as she threatened to devour every single one of them. Aaron wasn't bothered at all, looking at the demon eye parasite on his body and telling it to eat up. The skin on his chest began to turn pitch black as he unleashed the handprint of the demon, ready to end this fraud's career once and for all. The demonic parasite on Aaron's collarbone ordered him to eat the thing he called the handprint of the demon, promising that if its power was restored even a little, the duration and potency of the power the captain called aura would increase as well. The hardened veteran let out a thoughtful ho, realizing he could finally stop being a rapid fire, though he made sure to mention he really hated that nickname. He swung his blade with a blinding blur, sending a shockwave toward the villainess that made her eyes widen in terror. She barely managed to grunt as the force hit her, while the weary captain casually asked if her transformation was taking a bit too long. Crimson Darkness screamed at him to shut up, her hand morphing into massive, jagged claws that she slammed against the stone. The impact sent debris flying everywhere, but the monster of the inn didn't even flinch, landing a brutal kick that sent her skidding back. He spat a loud toey on the floor, observing that the black parts of her skin were actually pretty tough. The villainess let out a guttural growl as her body began to mutate, her skin bubbling and cracking until she transformed into a massive, shadowy beast made of pure nightmare fuel. Our hero just watched the show with a deadpan expression, asking if she could do that too, but when the demon eye asked if he wanted it to help, the rogue captain shot it down, claiming that pulling something like that out in a cramped space was just plain stupid. The monstrous villainess lunged at him with a roar, but the unit leader just stood his ground, taunting her to bring out the aura. She flared with a sickly green energy, her face a mask of rage, but the hardened veteran was already in motion. He carved through her attacks like they were nothing, making her scream that he was a total bastard. She called him a hypocrite for his methods, but the weary captain just gave her a predatory grin, asking what the hell she was talking about and claiming that was a bit too fancy for her. He joked that if it were him, he would have just insulted her parents. He unleashed a massive pillar of light that swallowed the entire room in a blinding explosion. When the dust settled, the villainess was nothing but a smear on the floor, leaving her sword embedded in the ground next to a small, glowing red stone. The captain picked up the handprint of the demon, staring at the pulsating rock before popping it into his mouth like a snack. He sat there for a second, casually remarking that it tasted like total crap. Nova watched the entire thing from the shadows, her jaw hitting the floor as she realized Eren had just used aura. Her mind was racing, screaming that Eren was a literal knight. Meanwhile, the city was in total chaos as guards ran through the streets, shouting that the intruder from the fortress went toward the town. Hardin was sprinting through the alleys with Kanna tucked under his arm, looking over his shoulder as guards closed in. He didn't hesitate for a second, unleashing a move called Crushing Darkness that flattened a soldier into the dirt with a sickening crunch. He kept moving, but he was sweating bullets, wondering where the hell the Night Hunter and Afflet were. According to the plan, the gates should have been open by now, and he realized at this rate, the mission was a total failure. He thought about escaping alone, but knew returning to the master without the girl was basically a death sentence. He stared at the unconscious Kanna, remembering the legend that consuming the heart of one beloved by mana could let someone reach the pinnacle of a mage. He realized if he ate her heart right there, he might gain power even greater than the master. He drew a wicked-looking dagger, telling himself he was a dead man either way and this was his only chance for survival. Just as he was about to strike, he heard the sound of heavy footsteps. He turned around, his eyes widening as he saw a lone figure standing in the alley. The Inquisitor stared him down with those cold, golden eyes, and Hardin realized he was in deep trouble. He screamed at her not to get in his way, mocking the idea of a lone Inquisitor stopping him as he unleashed a massive wave of black flames. The explosion rocked the buildings, but when the smoke cleared, the Inquisitor was still standing there, her armor glowing with a divine blue light. Hardin's face twisted in terror as he wondered what this power was, realizing it was at the level of the Holy Crusaders. She didn't say a word, just lunged forward with a strike that carved through his magic and his chest in one clean motion. She stood over his broken body, declaring judgment upon the demon as blood sprayed the walls. Back at the inner fortress, the captain leaned against a wall and watched the blood pool around him, noting that things were finally wrapping up. He figured the dark mages were all gone and the inner fortress guards could handle the rest. Kanna started groaning as she woke up, but our boy accidentally overdid it and knocked her out again with a well-placed bonk to the head. He stood under the moonlight, realizing he might have messed up a bit. As the long night passed and morning returned to Kaseridik, the sun rose over a battered but standing fortress. Nova was back at her desk, the light of dawn hitting her face as she tallied the casualties. She noted 3 soldiers were dead and 4 wounded, while the inner guards lost 2 men with 2 more injured. She stopped writing, her mind drifting back to the previous night. She thought about how Eren was definitely a knight, wondering if he had fled to Kaseridik after beating some noble to death in the past. It made sense to her why he refused any rank higher than guard captain, probably to avoid being recognized by people from his past. She decided it was highly likely and realized Eren was essential to the city. She knew she couldn't let him leave if his name got out, so she made a bold move. She decided to credit all of the last night's achievements to the Nepo baby Knight Ben to keep the spotlight off the captain. She chuckled to herself, thinking that Eren being a stiff knight didn't suit him at all and the thought alone gave her goosebumps. She slapped her cheeks, telling herself to get a grip and wondering if she was going crazy from staying up all night. She decided she didn't care if the scoundrel was a knight or not, she just needed to make sure a talent like him stayed put. Her thoughts were interrupted when Blossom walked in with tea, asking what she should eat to get a chest as big as hers. Nova just gave her a blank stare and asked excuse me. Outside in the garden, the captain was sitting shirtless and covered in bandages, groaning in pain. He cursed his luck, saying he really shouldn't have just eaten anything since he had been in the bathroom all morning. The demon eye on his chest mocked him, calling him rapid fire again and saying the thing he ate better be worth it. Aaron told it to shut up, but the parasite ignored him, telling him to draw his sword so it could show him something. The hardened veteran stood up and drew his blade, and suddenly, a massive explosion of blue lightning aura erupted from his body. It was a power completely different from before, crackling with insane intensity as the rogue captain realized his broken skill just got a massive upgrade. Aaron flared with that insane blue lightning aura, feeling his whole body burn like it was covered in blue flames as he realized he was finally overflowing with power. The hardened veteran thought to himself that this must be how those night bastards fly around just by wrapping themselves in aura, but then the energy suddenly hissed out and vanished. Our guy stood there in total silence for a second before asking what the hell just happened. The demon eye on his shoulder laughed, bragging that the duration had doubled to a whopping 4 seconds. Captain Aaron wasn't exactly impressed, sarcastically noting that the broken skill just went from a whoosh to a whoosh whoosh. The parasite told him it was going to sleep now, and the weary captain realized that if he kept picking up and eating every single demon he saw, he might actually become a real knight later. He laughed at the thought of himself as a knight, but his peace was interrupted when Abbot Brighton walked up, calling him Honorary Conventual Aaron. The priest mentioned he was worried since the captain had suddenly vanished the day before, asking if everything was all right. The unit leader just sighed, telling him that if he meant trouble, it had definitely just found him. The abbot went on a rant about how nothing was more important than prayer and how Holy Scripture says to value prayer over food since it was like a meal for the soul. The monster of the inn found it annoying that he was actually starting to get used to these kinds of conversations. Suddenly, Dylan came charging in, screaming that Big Brother should look because Purpley was a literal genius. Kanna, our favorite mini-fridge, held up a beer mug where she had used her ice magic to carve a perfect statue of the captain. Dylan pointed out that yesterday she was just rolling dice over her head, but now she was a master artist. Aaron immediately delivered a chop to Dylan's head, calling him an idiot and reminding him that the abbot was standing right behind them. The priest looked at Kanna and asked if she was his daughter, noting that the expression subtly resembled his. The captain quickly corrected him, saying she was just a child he was looking after. The abbot actually bowed and apologized if he offended them, which made the weary captain wonder why this high-ranking guy was apologizing to a kid. The priest was genuinely impressed by the ice, claiming he had never seen such detailed carving even in the capital and calling Kanna a sculptor instead of a mage. But then the ice sculpture's head snapped off with a crack, and everyone just stood there in awkward silence while the captain cursed his luck. Meanwhile, Nova knocked on Knight Ben's door, asking if he was feeling all right. She explained that under imperial law, a knight's body cannot be touched without permission, so they had laid him in bed exactly as he was found the night before. Ben sat up, still in his armor, and asked what she wanted. Nova bowed deeply, offering her sincere thanks on behalf of the residents for protecting Kaseritic. Ben was totally confused, asking if he actually protected anyone. Nova lied through her teeth, claiming Ben fended off the demon and the dark mage who used magic to infiltrate the fortress. She mentioned that Aaron, the outer wall guard captain, had found him and performed emergency first aid, claiming that if the captain had been even a moment later, Ben wouldn't have made it. The Nepo baby finally got the picture, realizing Aaron had saved him once again and wondering how a man without aura could slay a demon twice. Nova told him the Lord was granting him a reward and asked how he wanted to handle it. Ben didn't hesitate, telling her to give it all to Aaron since he had no need for it. Nova agreed and left, while Ben clenched his fist, thinking that just being steady wasn't enough. Back at the archives, Aaron walked in and asked if Orange was standing tall today. She ignored the sass and told him Ben was giving him the reward he received for slaying the demon. Our hero was shocked, asking why the hell Ben would do that. Nova explained it was because he saved Ben's life, and a clever little weasel named Dylan had told Ben that Aaron used 5 potions on him while he was injured. Aaron smirked, thinking that Dylan was a genius since it was actually 6 bottles and the kid must have miscounted in the dark. He was happy to let Ben take the credit for the demon, knowing it would only be a hassle if word got out that he was the one who actually caught it. Later that day, the lord of the city stood on the wall and celebrated, saying they took care of the monsters and the demon at the same time. He called for a massive festival to start that day. Ben and the blonde lady watched him, while the hardened veteran walked through the city, thinking about how it had been a while since the last party. He asked Nova how many people died, and she confirmed 3 soldiers and 2 inner guards were gone. Aaron thought the casualties were lower than expected but knew they couldn't just dismiss the dead as a number. He walked into an empty house that smelled like a bachelor's den, telling the ghost of the owner to keep the place clean if they were going to live alone. He found a bottle of good liquor and took a massive swig, reflecting on how anyone could die at any moment in these medieval ages. He thought it would be sad if no one even offered a prayer for the dead, noting that empty houses were popping up everywhere in this damn era. He muttered a rest in peace before Dylan found him, yelling for his captain and saying he needed to get to the plaza right away. Dylan complained that the nobles were already throwing a party when the cleanup wasn't even finished. The weary captain just grunted, annoyed that they wouldn't even give him a moment to be sentimental, and cursed the fucking medieval ages as he walked out. Meanwhile, at a different fortress entirely, a guard was screaming at the bearded giant, telling him this wasn't the Kassaritic Inner Fortress, it was Bolt Fortress. He told the giant that Kassaritic was a full day's journey away and asked why he was looking for it here. The night hunter stood there in shock, realizing he had followed the directions exactly and must have gotten lost again. He called it a major problem. Just then, a noble on a horse came charging through, screaming for the giant to move out of the way before his horse trampled him. The noble trash-talked the giant, saying since Sir Ben wasn't around lately, he thought he owned the place. One of the guards wondered if the bearded man was a knight, but the noble called him a scoundrel and said it was embarrassing to even call him a knight. The night hunter just looked up with a terrifying, bloodthirsty grin, realizing he had found the right way after all. He loomed over the noble, his eyes glowing with a murderous red light as he cracked his knuckles. He told the noble to run far away so the fun would last longer, finally ready to start the hunt. The plaza was packed shoulder to shoulder with people chugging beer and hollering like maniacs. Our guy was just trying to push through the crowd without getting drenched in ale. Right in the middle of it all, a bard sat strumming his lute, belting out a dramatic tale about the great knight baron supposedly slicing the throat of a fire-breathing demon. The hardened veteran himself stood right behind the performer, smirking as he asked if a wandering bard was next on his list of fake personas. The bard, Benhar, nearly jumped out of his skin when he spotted Aaron. The weary captain shook his head and reminded him he should have stayed home learning how to knead dough from his old man, the baker Hessen. But Benhar wasn't hearing it. He insisted his heart was calling him to be an artist. He whined that he just hadn't witnessed anything truly soul-stirring yet, but he was sure that seeing one big incident would instantly level up his skills. Aaron just shrugged. It's your life, kid. Do what you want. Suddenly Dylan came sprinting through the crowd, face pale with panic. He yelled that a massive brawl had broken out in District 6, Scar's crew versus those same guys from before. Aaron's eyes lit up red with a predatory grin. A brawl? Sounds terrible. I'd better go stop it before things get ugly. Dylan looked genuinely terrified. Captain, please watch your strength. You look way too happy about cracking skulls. Even Benhar perked up, claiming he could already smell the scent of a real incident. Down in the district, the alley was absolute mayhem. Thugs were screaming about wrecking everyone and killing everything in sight. Blood flew everywhere, until Aaron and Dylan stepped in. The captain casually clapped his hands. You idiots really fight every single chance you get, huh? Dylan stood beside him looking exhausted while Aaron told the punks that playtime was over. Time to hit the dirt. One thug recognized him instantly and let out a terrified scream. Scoundrel Aaron. The rest dropped to the ground in fear. Their leader stepped out of the shadows, confused, asking what the hell was wrong with his men. He trash-talked them for cowering in front of a few guards and called the whole thing pathetic. He launched a massive kick, but Aaron caught his leg with zero effort. The guy tried to play it cool. Just a minor quarrel. Since when do guards interfere in private fights? He even reminded Aaron they'd slipped him silver coins as a bribe. Should have just looked the other way. Aaron stared at him with a completely deadpan expression. You excited from the fight or something? He muttered that now he had a real reason to step in. Dylan winced. This guy really shouldn't have said that. The leader kept digging his own grave, calling Aaron some nobody from the sticks who'd regret getting involved. He bragged that they weren't like those amateur gangsters. Aaron just started laughing. The thug looked confused. You think this is a joke? Aaron answered with a punch so brutal it practically turned the guy's face inside out. Standing over him, the captain growled, Don't underestimate the frontier. The rest of the crew charged with a scream, but Aaron tore through the entire alley like a storm. Dylan watched from the side while Benhar stood frozen, eyes sparkling with pure inspiration. This was it, the soul-moving moment he'd been waiting for. He started strumming like a madman, singing about the scoundrel in Kasseritic Fortress who was worse than any demon. The festival eventually died down and the city returned to its usual rhythm. Traders poured back through the gates as life picked up again. Aaron went on his usual inspections when he overheard some guards gossiping about fresh news. Knight Petron of Bolt Fortress had been brutally murdered by a giant man who cut off the knight's feet and sang while hunting him down like prey. Aaron pieced it together quickly. Even though a battle had happened, only the knight died. That giant was definitely the same guy he'd met earlier. He smirked, noting that Bolt Fortress was in the complete opposite direction. Man's got a truly terrible sense of direction. He wondered if the giant was specifically hunting knights and muttered that he was one strange fellow. He also caught that the 5 scoundrels of Bahart County were now down to 4, but his thoughts were interrupted by a bald guy walking up. It was Delmuto, the mage from Karzan. He bowed low and announced that Aaron's servant had arrived as summoned. Aaron looked at him like a total fraud. Delmuto was practically crying tears of joy, claiming he'd brought everything he had. When Aaron asked if that meant offering his knowledge, and the mage said he was ready to offer his everything, the captain realized the guy basically had nothing but himself. Go wait at the Laughing Rabbit Tavern. I'm working. Just as the mage left, a carriage rolled up. A guy named Jillian hopped out, proudly identifying himself as a level 5 informant for the White Leaf Guild. Aaron didn't give a damn about the clout. This is an inspection. Get down. Jillian was shocked by the attitude and tried to explain they were from a big guild. Aaron just hit him with a cold, so what, and told him to get down again. Jillian was shaking when a woman stepped out of the carriage. It was Razvet, another member of the same guild. Aaron asked what brought them all the way out here. She smiled and said they were planning to open a branch in Kasseritic for a preliminary survey. The captain thought she had a sharp presence but didn't really care. He took their silver coins and let them pass. Dylan watched the carriage roll away, thinking the city was finally starting to develop. Aaron, however, didn't like the sound of an information guild moving in. Inside the carriage, Razvet stared out the window, eyes narrowing. She thought to herself that she had definitely seen that look on Aaron before, and wondered exactly where she had encountered it. Dylan was losing his mind, screaming for his big brother because their purple-haired Kanna was an absolute genius. Even Delmuto popped up, looking way too happy for someone who'd just had his life spared. Kanna gave a smug little smirk and decided to show off what she'd learned. She channeled her mana, and a swirl of water magic engulfed a crusty wooden mug. Aaron was actually impressed. She literally invented dishwashing magic. Dylan cheered like a total fanboy, calling Kanna a legend as the beer mug sparkled clean in seconds. But the magic quickly went haywire and drenched Dylan in a massive splash, leaving him looking like a drowned rat. Kanna realized her mistake and watched as Dylan coughed and gagged on the floor. Aaron just stood there while Dylan gave a shaky thumbs up, sarcastically thinking Kanna looked a bit discouraged by the failure. Meanwhile, Razvet was back in her office, slamming her hands onto a table covered in wanted posters. She'd finally recognized those distinct features and felt like an idiot for not seeing it sooner. She stared at the drawing of a man with the same intense eyes, even without the scar on his nose yet. She knew it was definitely him, but his vibe was completely different from the records. She read the fine print on the old orders, which warned to take no action upon discovery and report to headquarters immediately. Jillian walked in yawning, asking if she'd found something, but nearly had a heart attack when he saw the red lettering. He screamed that red lettering meant a direct order from the guild master himself and insisted they head to Karzan right away to send word through the central line. But Razvet told him to shut up. They weren't reporting anything. This was a golden opportunity. Reporting it would get her nothing, but a red level wanted poster meant someone very powerful was looking for him. With that kind of priority, the reward would be beyond imagination. Jillian realized she was living up to her nickname, blinded by ambition, and wondered if following a level 3 informant who thought like a psycho was really okay. The next morning, Aaron was out in a field swinging his sword with enough force to create massive wind gusts. Jillian hid in the bushes, scribbling notes like a total stalker, thinking the unit leader was surprisingly diligent for a mere guard. Then his jaw dropped when Abbot Brighton showed up so early. He wondered if the monster of the inn was actually using the abbot as an errand boy. Things got even crazier when he saw Kanna casually using high-level ice magic just to clean mugs. Jillian realized a simple guard captain was enjoying luxuries even frontier nobles couldn't afford. 2 personal mages at his beck and call. He kept watching as Aaron did a secret fist bump with a group of thugs, making the informant wonder if he was running his own private organization and if that armor marked a secret society. He saw Aaron grab the massive Delmudo by the collar and slam him into the dirt like it was nothing. He saw him meeting with the Inquisitor from the Order and thugs bowing their heads, handing over silver coins in a display of loyalty. By the end of the day, Jillian was shaking, unable to understand half of what he'd written. Razvet, however, was already a step ahead. She walked through the streets, narrowing down who could have issued such a high-tier request. It had to be the Empire, the Order, or someone ranked Marquis or higher. She ruled out the Order because Aaron was tight with the abbot, and figured the Empire would have caught him by now. She approached a door, but the moment she stepped inside, something felt wrong. The air was different. Suddenly Aaron appeared right behind her in the dark. He leaned in close. "I wouldn't recommend taking out that hidden weapon." He joked that it wasn't a coincidence. This was actually his house. Razvet tried to stay calm, but she knew she'd messed up badly by letting him make the first move. The captain gave her a smug grin. "Falling for me a bit too fast? Stalking me, digging into my past, it's quite overwhelming." He knew the idiot Jillian had been caught tailing him. "I'll keep this brief. I have plans." He told her she seemed curious about who issued the red-level request and offered to tell her exactly who it was. Then he laid out his trap. Use his wanted poster as bait to lure the requester to Karzan. He'd pay her 50% more than the commission fee if she pulled it off. Razvet was speechless. "Are you serious?" Aaron just smirked. "The fact that your head is still on your shoulders is proof enough." He handed her a list of people capable of issuing the request, Marquis-rank nobles and large-scale mercenary groups. She looked at it and realized the person who fit both criteria was a terrifying possibility. She turned to ask him another question, but he was already gone, leaving a massive human-shaped hole in the stone wall. Razvet clutched the papers, realizing that's what the bastard had meant by wall repairs. He really was a total mystery. The ball was rolling now. If she didn't want to be crushed by the coming storm, she had to keep moving. Aaron was busy showing Night Ben what real strength looks like, clashing blades in a training session that left the Nepo baby shaking. The hardened veteran swung his sword with a heavy impact, overwhelming Ben's guard until the ground beneath them cracked from the sheer pressure. Ben was sent flying, hitting the dirt as our hero stood over him with a cold, piercing gaze. The weary captain exhaled a long puff of smoke, watching as Ben admitted that he really was amazing. The silver-haired knight sat there on the ground, touching his blade and confessing that he lost the bout. Ben admitted he thought the rogue captain would back away when he lunged, but instead, the unit leader stepped in and swung his blade with zero hesitation. The knight realized he had gotten complacent, relying way too much on the absolute sharpness of his aura. He thanked the monster of the inn for helping him remember what he had forgotten in his own stagnation, promising that next time things would be different. Our protagonist just looked at him like he was a total weirdo, wondering why a guy who just got his ass kicked looked so relieved. He gave a sarcastic smirk and said he would look forward to it while Ben insisted he was being dead serious. As Aaron started to walk away, Ben asked if he was from the battlefield, claiming his swordsmanship felt familiar, like a knight he once met on the Empire's Western Front. The hardened veteran just kept walking, giving a mysterious, "who knows," with a grin that proved he was definitely hiding some elite history from his past. Meanwhile, back at the guild house, Jillian woke up and spotted 2 golden loaves of bread sitting on the table. He thought Razvet was being a total sweetheart and making him breakfast, humming a happy tune about how bread always tastes better when you shove 2 pieces in your mouth at once. He cheered about doing his best today, but then Razvet loomed over him like a vengeful ghost. She was fuming, asking if it was common sense to eat both pieces when there were 2 people in the room. Jillian kept stuffing his face while the narration dubbed him the guy who eats 2 pieces of bread for breakfast. Later that morning, the unit leader walked in to find the fortress commander literally melting into his chair from the heat. The commander was sweating buckets, telling Aaron to just get out because it was too hot to deal with anything. Dylan suggested the captain should just take the commander's spot, but the rogue captain shot that down instantly, claiming it would just be more work for him. He realized summer was hitting hard and thought about upgrading his mini-fridge canna before things got even worse, maybe by asking Jackson for a high-tier magic book. He walked toward the main gates and found a massive commotion. He asked the guards why they hadn't opened the gates yet, and they pointed to a literal sea of people waiting outside. Rumors were flying that Bolt Fortress had sent a flood of immigrants toward Kaseritic due to the chaos in Karzan. Aaron casually mentioned that Bolt was just a place where a knight died, which made his subordinate scream that he shouldn't say things like that in public. Our guy didn't care, asking if he couldn't even mention that some knight got his ass kicked and died. The guard panicked even more while the weary captain realized Karzan was a total lawless wasteland right now. The biggest syndicate was crumbling, and other groups were stabbing each other in the street every single day. The hardened veteran wondered if he hadn't cleaned things up well enough before he left Kazan, but decided their own guards could handle the mess. He ordered the gates open to start the inspection, thinking it would be a good way to kill some time. He gave the incoming refugees a terrifying, red-eyed welcome smile that made them look like they wanted to turn around and run for their lives. The guards noted there were fewer people than before, and the unit leader just started the process. He looked at a guy with a shiny forehead and passed him for looking like a hard worker. He passed a guy with thick eyebrows for looking like a diligent man. He even passed a 14-year-old kid who looked like he was 40, noting the poor guy must have had a rough time on the frontier. Then, a group of massive Kazan thugs stepped up, looking like they knew how to throw a punch. One bald guy bragged about being a stonemason before coming here, but Aaron just cracked his knuckles with a grim expression. Without a single word of warning, the rogue captain delivered a brutal punch that sent the thug's head snapping back with a spray of blood. The other thugs were stunned, but the captain just noted that the guy looked flustered but didn't attack or swear after being hit, so he passed him. He called for the next person, but nearly half the crowd started booking it in the opposite direction after seeing that violent display. Aaron just grinned, thinking those people must have had guilty consciences. The thugs who stayed were shaking, wondering if coming to Kaseritic was a mistake because they never imagined a guard would be such a total thug. One guy named Zenta, whose favorite thing was low-key rabbits, was actually crying from fear. Another named Brown, who liked bears, and Gibbs, who loved ponies, decided to stay because it was still better than the trash fire that was Kazan. They spotted the Laughing Rabbit Tavern and headed inside, hoping for a peaceful stay. Meanwhile, Razvet was deep in research, looking at a profile of the former King Ethan. She knew that as a marquis and owner of a large mercenary group, Ethan was the only one who fit the red level criteria. She wondered what the hell Aaron's connection to a man like Ethan could be. Suddenly, the captain appeared right behind her, telling her she seemed lost in thought. She jumped in shock, asking what he was doing there without a word. He joked that he came to keep an eye on her in case her mind started wandering. She tried to play it off with a blush and some fake flirting, saying he was the only thing on her mind all day. Aaron just smirked and said he would come back tomorrow too. He tossed a package on the desk, claiming he was dropping off a housewarming gift that was a local specialty of Kaseritic. Razvet looked at the food after he left, calling it hideous and thinking it was some kind of insult. Back at the office, Jillian saw the morning bread again and wondered if Razvet was actually interested in him. He shoved the whole thing in his mouth and immediately let out a gagging scream. He realized the bread was stuffed with pickled fish and demanded to know who would put something so cursed inside bread. Razvet appeared with a dark aura, telling him it was a specialty called fish bread. She ordered him to stuff his face with both pieces, since he was the guy who loved eating 2 pieces of bread every morning. Jillian made a vow right then and there that no matter how pretty she was clearly insane, and he was rejecting her feelings for the sake of his own survival. Jillian might have thought he was the one suffering, but back at the tavern, the vibes were high as everyone crowded around our purpley canna. The mini fridge was showing off a perfect ice sculpture inside a mug, and the crowd was losing it, calling the display so cute while noting the ice looked weirdly familiar. The Kazan thugs were cheering her on, but the moment the show was over, Kanna's expression went stone cold. She held out her hands and demanded that if they were done watching, it was time to pay up. The massive thugs looked at each other in total disbelief, wondering if they really just got extorted by a little kid, but they handed over the cash anyway. Zenta and the others sat down to eat their bread, trying to relax, but then Zenta accidentally slipped and dropped his loaf on the floor with a heavy thud. The entire tavern went dead silent, and every single local turned to stare at them with intense, shadowed eyes. The thugs started sweating bullets, wondering if the residents were judging them because they were outsiders. But as they looked around, they saw the locals weren't angry. They were looking at the thugs with massive expectations. Zenta and Brown shared a look, realizing this was where they were settling down and they had to make a good impression. They decided to give the people exactly what they wanted, jumping up and slamming their hands onto the table with an impact that shook the room. The tavern door creaked open, and the hardened veteran walked in, wondering why the place was so loud. He spotted the troublemakers, and his eyes began to glow with a murderous red light. The unit leader cracked his knuckles, claiming he guessed he was working overtime today as a terrifying aura flared around him. The thugs were terrified, but the locals were cheering, finally getting the fight they were waiting for. A few minutes later, the Kazan boys were scattered across the floor like discarded laundry. The captain stood over them, mocking them for being nothing compared to the mess they caused. He noted they even passed his personality test since they didn't try to attack or swear when things got physical, though he privately thought he might have to hit them harder next time. Just then, Henna walked in, telling Aaron she saw massive potential in Kanna's ice beer. She claimed that at least in Kaseridik, the kid's brew had no rival. She announced a massive plan to become the richest person in the Eastern Empire using that ice beer. Our boy looked skeptical about the richest person part, but Henna ignored him. She beamed at the half-conscious thugs, telling them that since they were awake, they needed to pay for all the broken chairs and tables. The bald Zenta cried that they didn't actually break anything, but Henna didn't care. She told them not to worry because they could just work at the shop to pay off the debt. She gave a wink, announcing they were now employees at the Laughing Aaron Rabbit Tavern. The weary captain was horrified by the name, imagining himself with bunny ears, but Henna pointed out that using his name meant no one would ever dare pick a fight. She told the thugs they were lucky to get equity in exchange for their service, though the rogue captain knew they clearly had no idea what equity actually was. He watched as the three suckers got totally hooked by her corporate jargon about initial investments and risk. He thought they were lucky they met Henna, because if they met someone actually cruel, they'd be on a Kraken hunting ship by now. Meanwhile, outside in the pouring rain, a messenger pigeon landed on a windowsill. Razvet was busy tossing out useless wanted posters, looking for Aaron's specific file. She wondered how one man could have so many nicknames, ranging from sand-spitting scoundrel to sand-eating scoundrel. She had planned to sell the info and run, but realized most of the current records were garbage. She turned around to see Jillian sneaking in through the window again, dripping wet and clutching more bread. She fumed, asking why the idiot kept coming through the wall instead of the door and confusing everyone. Jillian tried to compliment her beauty, but he noted her personality was a total problem. Razvet didn't want to hear it and pulled out a magical self-defense tool with a built-in strike spell. She zapped him once, then twice, making him scream in agony as the electricity fried him. She stared at a new poster, one that labeled our guy as Aaron who ruined the kingdom. She wondered what that nickname meant, but when Jillian tried to interrupt, she zapped him a third time to shut him up. She noted that 2 gold coins vanished in an instant for the tool, but seeing Jillian twitch on the floor made it well worth the price. Deep in the woods, Jillian was running through the rain, terrified of what he was getting into. He spotted a massive cloaked figure standing in the path and froze. He asked if the person was also a migrant heading to Kaseridik, warning them to find somewhere else to go because dark mages had attacked and the guards there were absolute savages. The figure didn't answer, and Jillian was suddenly cut down in a flash of movement, his body hitting the mud. The cloaked man noted they had come all the way to the frontier and heard Kaseridik was famous because a baron took to the skies and the lord's daughter was a legendary beauty. A second figure appeared, a literal talking skeleton named Darbun, the Nightmare Eater. He revealed the young lady was their target and offered to fill his partner Dune in on the plan. Dune, the fledgling, snapped that he wasn't curious and wondered why a guy who used intent magic moved his jaw every time he spoke. He muttered that if Darbun weren't his superior, he would have ended him. The skeleton explained that a massive underground organization like theirs received guidelines from the Empire, because it was impossible to survive against a power that swallowed the continent. He claimed that as long as they followed the rules, the Empire turned a blind eye to them, just like back-alley thugs and a local administrator. Darbun complained that dark mages and demon vessels were usually too stupid and rebellious to listen, but he praised Dune for being a vessel who knew how to read the room. He explained it was all about efficiency and not over-investing manpower. Dune suggested a cooler nickname like Destroyer of Chatty Skeleton Heads, but Darbun just told him to wipe off the rainwater before his bones rotted. The skeleton summoned a small army of breathless ones, ordered them to march in formation, and laid out the simple plan. They would feed Dune fear until he was no longer a fledgling, and once he grew strong enough to deal with the night, Darbun would handle the rest. He noted that instilling fear in the weak was his specialty and called them a perfect dream team. Dune hated the chatty bag of bones but couldn't deny their abilities complemented each other. The two villains stood in the storm, ready to sow some absolute fear in Kaseridik. The storm was absolutely relentless, turning the Kaseridik fortress into a soggy mess, but that was the least of their problems. One of the guards, a guy named Poole, was checking the gates when another soldier came running through the downpour to report that everything was locked down tight. Poole noted that with rain like this, no one in their right mind was coming to the fortress, so they might as well head down and take cover until it stopped. But the second guard had a bad feeling, his chest feeling tight and his breath hitching for no reason. He admitted it felt like he was standing right in front of the captain, like some demon that looked just like Aaron was about to jump out and ruin his day. Right on cue, a bolt of lightning illuminated a literal skeleton with glowing purple eyes standing right behind them. The guard let out a blood-curdling scream for his brother as the undead freak lunged. Poole tried to fight it off, the sound of bone clashing against steel ringing out through the rain. He screamed for Dylan to run, telling the weasel to ring the bell and report the situation to the commander immediately. Dylan didn't need to be told twice, booking it while screaming that a demon had appeared. The town was instantly thrown into a panic, with people wondering how a demon could be there so soon after they moved in. One uncultured pig started pointing fingers at a woman, claiming her dancing must have summoned the beast, but she just called him an idiot. The fortress commander burst out of his room, looking like he hadn't slept in years, yelling that it was an emergency and skeleton soldiers were everywhere. He ordered everyone to grab their weapons or tools and get to the walls right now, claiming it was the Lord's direct order. Some of the residents were shook, wondering if they were expected to fight too. A guy named Gelm, who was a total fraud, decided he was heading to the inner fortress instead. He flexed his ego, claiming the Lord was fond of his leather vests and it would be a disaster if he got hurt fighting a demon. The other cowards agreed, saying they would just die if they went out there and that fighting was a guard's job anyway. But they didn't get far because Henna and Kanna were blocking the path, with our little mini-fridge holding a frying pan like a deadly weapon. Henna mocked them, asking where they thought they were going after being told to get to the walls. She called them out for acting tough all the time but running the moment a real fight started. She told them that if they were going to be such cowards, they should just cut it all off and be done with it. Gelm was fuming, asking how she dared to speak to him like that as he raised a hand to strike her. Suddenly, a massive hand grabbed his shoulder, and a guard delivered a brutal punch that sent Gelm's head snapping back with a spray of blood. The crowd realized they had to move, and some geezers started shouting to get to the gates because leaving everything to the guards was the definition of cowardly. Gelm wiped the blood from his lip, asking what those drunks were talking about and if a high-class professional like him was really the same as them. Henna stepped up with a crossbow aimed right at his face, telling him they weren't just drunks, they were regulars at the Laughing Aaron Rabbit. She screamed that she would remember every single person who ran to the inner fortress and she was going to tell the hardened veteran everything. That threat actually worked because an army of skeletons was already pouring over the walls like a purple tide. Vermin was hacking away at the bones, asking where the hell Aaron was, but another guard shouted that they hadn't seen the unit leader since he went on patrol. They wondered if they should be looking for him first, but they were too busy being overrun. Henna kept screaming for our boy, asking where he was and what he was doing while they were all dying. Just as a skeleton was about to deliver a killing blow, a flash of green light carved through the undead horde. A powerful knight named Adela dropped in, her green hair flowing as she wiped out the skeletons in an instant. The guards were hyped, realizing she was a real knight and was actually doing work. Dylan and Poole managed to hold their ground, thinking they should brag about this to the captain later. Dylan mocked the demons, calling them idiots for trying to climb over instead of just breaking the gate, wondering what a demon would even know about sieges. But then his face went pale as he heard a voice from the top of the wall. The skeleton boss Darbun was standing there, claiming that the moment you think it's over is actually the most dangerous. He mocked them for being foolish breathers, while the thugs looked up in horror, realizing there was a talking skeleton in charge. Darbun looked down with glowing eyes, noting that they were all weaker than him. He unleashed a massive wave of purple energy that sent everyone crashing to the ground. Henna collapsed in terror, while Darbun noted that someone was actually able to withstand his nightmare. It was Abbot Brighton, who stood there trembling but refusing to fall. The priest spat out that it was a sin to use such unholy power against believers. Darbun actually started clapping his bony hands, sarcastically noting it was more of a clack-clack since he was a bag of bones. He leaned in close, whispering something into the abbot's ear that turned the priest's face into a mask of pure horror. The skeleton mocked him, calling him a saint who killed his own son with his own hands. He laughed that the god the abbot served was quite cruel. But the priest didn't want to hear it. The abbot lunged with a hidden blade, but Darbun was way too fast, the light in his eyes glowing with a sinister heat. A massive explosion rocked the area, leaving the abbot gasping for air on the ground. Darbun told him he should have just stayed down and played dead, mocking the idea that the priest could do anything to him. He watched as the abbot collapsed into a puddle, noting that falling into the water must have woken him from the nightmare. Darbun stood over his broken body, declaring that those who breathe are quite foolish. He looked around at the chaos, relishing the air that was thick with sweet nightmares. He wanted to savor this rare nightmare to the fullest. Meanwhile, inside a nearby building, the rogue captain was sitting by a window, arms crossed and looking absolutely unbothered by the screaming outside. Our hero stared into the rain with a cold, analytical gaze, clearly waiting for the perfect moment to join the chat and show this chatty skeleton what a real nightmare looks like. And there you have it, folks. Scoundrel Aaron just turned a demon invasion into his personal stress relief session. But with that chatty skeleton Darbun still running wild and the fortress on the brink, what the hell is our boy gonna pull out next? Drop a like if Aaron's chaotic energy lives rent-free in your head, subscribe so you don't miss the absolute madness coming, and tell me in the comments, who's getting wrecked first, the skeleton or the nobles? I'll see you in the next one. Stay savage.